Okay.
And I'd like a motion, I'll make a motion to open the board meeting. Is there a second? Please, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Meeting's open.
Steve, just for reference, I believe that item 8, 7 Fairlawn requested to be last because they had a conflicting appointment.
I was gonna actually switch them with 156, so get them out of there.
Right, but I think they may, well, you could check when we get to them, but they had asked to be last because they may be late.
Okay, well, let's check if they're there, then we'll put them on, and rather than have them wait through 156.
Sounds good.
Okay, good. First item on our agenda is to adopt the minutes for the planning board meeting of September 3, 2020. I'd move that are there any comments or changes that people have?
I didn't have any changes, but I noticed that they included all the plans and drawings and renderings and stuff were included in the
Yeah.
minutes.
I printed it out. That was a big mistake.
Oh, okay. It just
No, not okay, actually.
Oh, okay. No, because I just didn't understand because some of the quality of some of the prints made them impossible to read. I just
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's kind of nice to have it all in
Yeah.
one place.
Well,
Yeah.
it is. It's a nice, it'll look good. Anyway, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Passed. The first item on our agenda is item number 2, 13 English Lane, continuation of public hearing for site plan approval for proposed new multifamily building. Is there someone here to represent?
Yes, I am just promoting them
Thank you.
to panelist. Lizette, if you could okay, good. Should be all set.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Lizette Elias, and I'll be presenting on behalf of Christina Griffin tonight for our client, Andrew Cortese. I'm going to share my screen. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, sorry. Let's see. Okay, let's try and do this temporarily. Does that work?
Yep, I was able to do it. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up the proposed site plan. So after the last planning board meeting, there was discussion to push the building back 5 feet to create a pedestrian sidewalk. So we have done that in this scheme. The footprint of the building changed a bit because we had to push everything back and all the grades affected how the building was sitting on the lot. But we are giving you a 5-foot sidewalk. This area here for the garage is set back even further. That setback from the property line is 9'6". And then we had to move the entrances to the side of the building. So there are 2 entrances to 2 of the units on the right-hand side and 1 entrance on the left-hand side. And at the front of the building, we have the entrance to the garage. So I'll pull the latest elevation. And as you can see here, this allowed us to continue the grade of the street that's existing. We could not make the entrances work on the front, but this gives those units a bit of privacy by having the entrances on the side of the building. The garage doors are set back, like I mentioned before, and there's an entrance to the left to the garage. I'm gonna go to the plan. A few changes to the sizes of the parking spaces had to be modified, so that was done. We have an ADA parking spot. You enter at the side here and you can come in and out of the garage from this entrance. We were also asked to consider entrances from the garage itself. So we have an entrance for this unit here, an entrance for this unit here. And I see that's not shown here, but we are proposing an entrance for this unit from here. So there are entrances from the outside at the sides of the building and entrances from the garage itself. The rest of the plans didn't change very much. The configurations remain the same. We have steps out. Instead, we have eliminated the patios and are now proposing open yard space divided by low fences at each unit. This is the rear setback, just showing the grade changes. So we did change, we separated each unit and they move with the grade at the site and they fit much better on the site. Here you see on the east elevation, 2 entrances, and on the west elevation, 1 entrance to one of the units. The existing streetscape, as you know, there's nothing on the lot now, and we are proposing these 3 units here. The rear yard setback is now 19 feet 4 inches. The side yard setbacks are all met, 5 foot on one side and 14.8 on the other. And all of the other zoning data works fine on the lot. That's all. That's it. Do you have any questions for us?
I think for me, I'm Laura. I visited the site and I found when I drove down this little cul-de-sac, which was a quite inspiration in some ways, because I didn't know it existed in our little community here. But I found that because the street is so narrow, that cars are parked on one side, and I had a really hard time maneuvering my car to turn around to actually view the site. So I guess one of my concerns is that when people are entering and exiting the site with a vehicle, how convenient is that? Because it seemed to me that the way the garage is located, that it's not as accessible as this drawing shows. And when I walked along the property and looked at the way that the building was staked out, where the actual building would have been or will be proposed, that it seems too tight. I mean, everything just seems too tight for me. And I'm wondering if somehow I'm trying, I know that you probably want to put, obviously 3 units on this property, but I'm wondering if you're really, trying to get as much as you can out of such a small parcel in such a congested area. And I don't know how the neighbors feel like at the end of the street, because I even noticed there, it's a tight squeeze for them to get into their driveway, and there's two actually driveways, or maybe there might even be 3, but it's very tight. Everything seems very, constricted. So I don't know, it just seems too big for me. That's my opinion.
We did consider, we know the street is narrow. We did consider, this is why the garage is set back 9'6", so that you can pull in, and you can also, turn around within this area here, which is 18 feet is the curb cut. And that's also why we thought that moving the main entrances away from the front of the building would be ideal as well. By not having any of the entrances, really the sidewalk would be, free of that. But of course, we don't want cars on the sidewalk, but this does sort of prevent there being any accidents there. by pushing the building back, you know, we are already in the rear yard setback. And, you know, I guess we could potentially move it back, but then we get into, side, you know, interfering with the side yards as well, and not just the rear yard.
Mhm.
Andrew
Well, it,
has raised his hand. Shall I promote him to panelist?
Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew? Can you hear us? Let's see. Can you unmute yourself, Andrew?
All right. Hi, how you doing? So I just wanted to make a point of that's why kind of we recessed the garage, so even other people on the street can kind of use that turnaround if they're in the roadway. Because if you went down there now, we have that kind of fence going across. I just wanted to make that point.
well, it's Steve Hunter. It's clearly a unique site in Dobbs Ferry that many of us didn't even know existed. So it's fun to see what might be possible down there. I drove in and was able to turn around, not on the property because it's fenced off now, but further down and turn around and not have any problem getting back out again. I think setting it back as you've done is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's an oddball site. I guess I'm wondering, has the fire department, do they look at these things at all just to make sure that they're comfortable about, like, I realize it's inconvenient for a car. I could live with that. I feel like people on a little street like this, they kind of figure it out and they learn how to do it. But I'm curious whether or not do we ever have or does the fire department have to, I can't even remember if are they part of this review at some point, just to make
You
sure
can
that,
send it, Rob, you could send it to them anytime you want. You can refer it to any board or department for review that you want. You know, we could have them take a look. I mean, they have to get down there now to fight any of the buildings on the end of the street. This
Right.
isn't gonna restrict the truck from coming down any more than it already is. It's a narrow street.
Yeah.
They've moved it back. You know, we haven't seen this plan yet. This is what was staked out on the site was the original plan. Now this one is pushed back 5 feet. So you're going to have to grant a waiver for the rear yard setback to move it back and create a sidewalk there. And maybe, Andrew, are you willing to build a curb there as you're improving this?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a curb with, you know, monolithic sidewalk or an independent curb, whatever you prefer.
Good.
okay.
So I think with this garage setback, he does have the turning radius. Perhaps at the next meeting, you could prove that to the engineer. And
Sure.
We can also mark it out if you want to see the width of the garage and that distance of that, you know, that,
yeah, that'd be nice.
this way you can get a visual of how, you know, much room you have, or anybody else can turn around on the street.
Yeah. I think you're helping people if you allow them to use your driveway to make a broken U-turn.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to stake it out.
I
so
mean, I
that-
know the maximum curb cut is 18 feet, and we're taking advantage of that 18 feet. I don't know if it makes sense to make that any bigger, but we no longer have the entrances in the front. So if you felt like it was too tight, I don't know how you feel about this, Andrew, but we could widen that.
Yeah.
The garage doors will, of course, remain the same size, but we can widen that turnaround so that cars can get in there.
Yeah, I think we can stake it out and try to make it flare it as best we can. This way, we can maximize the turning radius for people within the neighborhood as well as.
Mhm.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
I know this isn't really the planning board's purview, but the previous design had nice detailing in terms of the facades with the entrances there. It was a little bit like, little townhouses. And now that the predominant feature is the garage door, I just think this is probably the Architectural and Historic Review Board, but just do a little bit more to celebrate the entrances on the sides or do something on the front to, make it look like it's not a garage. That's just,
Yeah, well, we're
suggestion.
gonna do landscaping. There's certainly gonna be landscaping, and we're gonna play with materials. The rendering hasn't been updated, but we're gonna
Yeah.
certainly play with materials and have landscaping at the front of the.
No, I realize this is probably diagrammatic, but it's just taking the entrances off the front is just a little, it's a little sad. But I understand it's what you need to do.
Yeah,
I think on the other rendering, we had stone veneer on there, so we're definitely gonna dress it up.
Okay.
Could you
I
go
think
back-
I'd like to support just some things that have already been covered. I think it's great that it's been moved back. When I visited the site, it was, putting it right on the street would have been way too much. So moving it back is a really good thing. Also, the street is very tight. I support Laura's position there, and I think as long as we have the engineers review that carefully, that's okay. And we might want to loop in the fire department. And last, we've had a lot of discussion on Palisades about having the entrances on the street and how important that is to the character of these buildings. And in this case, moving those doors to the side, I understand why it works plan-wise, but it really makes the street view or impression look like a parking level. And I'm not sure that's what we want.
Can I offer one possibility of a sort of a way out of that, which, and it's good we're looking at the ground floor plan, is that I realize you have a sort of composition for this elevation that you're trying to create, but wouldn't it be possible for the whole corner on both sides to have so much glass, essentially, because it is labeled foyer and then there's a stair. Isn't it possible that basically, even though the door is from the side, that you could have enough glass and opening there so that it kind of mitigated some of what Alan is talking about? Do you have that? Can we look at that street elevation again? So I realize you have these kind of, this nice symmetry and everything, but that corner, that whole corner where the small window is on each side, that could essentially be all glazed. And it could even have a bay window or something like that. And I think that would go a long way to mitigating what Alan is talking about.
So you can actually see an entrance, but not necessarily be.
Right, you could see into the foyer, it would be lit at
Right.
night. It would be, it would relieve some of what Alan is talking about.
Mhm. That's interesting.
Or a corner entrance.
Yeah, or it could be glazed that way, it could look like an all glass corner essentially, even if the door itself is from the side.
Right.
Maybe even the awning piece, the cover piece kind of wraps the corner in some way. So I think
Right.
there's a way to make it look like there are two corner entries. And I think that might do it.
Or just not make it look so it doesn't look like it's the basement.
Right.
I was just thinking, now that we don't have the entrance on the front, we don't necessarily need the sidewalks. We could do landscaping within that 4 feet. I don't know how you guys feel about that. On the left or the right of the door.
Is there any sidewalk on the other side? I didn't happen to notice. On the other side of the street?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is, but I'd prefer not to put any planting in the right, the right of way is the street, actually. That's the problem here. The property line goes right to the street.
Right.
So I think pushing it back is opening up sort of a sort of right of way on your property, just
Yeah.
a clear space from the street to open car doors or to just walk by the house. So not crazy about the planting idea.
Mhm. Makes sense.
I think you ought to look at what Rob said or what Steve suggested, a possible, you could cut the corner entrance. That sounds interesting also.
Mhm.
Corner might work. I mean, these bays up above are, full height bays, so that's what sort of made the heights tricky there, but I think we can play with that and come up with something for the corners.
I think that
Also,
might.
a
do it.
lighted space.
This scheme also, we were able to accommodate a proper waste area, a utility room, I think it sort of worked out all of those areas on this little.
You have a bicycle area?
So, we could use this area here for bikes. It's probably gonna fit, one or two bikes. It's tight, and we didn't want to push the building back any further.
Right.
I may have missed it. Have you been to the Architecture Review Board?
No.
We're kind of trying to work out the footprint first, right? They were just told to stake it out last meeting and think about pushing it back, and they just did that and really didn't even get it back to us yet.
Right.
So I think we should look at it one more time and then
Yeah.
maybe refer to the HRB.
It was very helpful to stake it out and see it that in that way. So I thank you for that.
Anybody else at this point? Well, then I'm sorry, go ahead. If not, I think we should continue this to our next meeting, the November meeting. That sounds strange, but November.
Mr. Chair, is there an indication from that anybody is waiting to speak on this because it is a public hearing?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
So that would be November 5th then.
Yep.
Fifth, good grief. Well, then I move we continue at the next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, guys?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
That sounds like unanimous.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Our next item number 3 on our agenda, 2 Parkway Drive, continuation of public hearing for site plan approval for proposed 2 new 2-car garage and with deck above and 2-story extension on the house.
Lizette, can you stop sharing your screen, please? Lizette, can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Did she leave?
Uh-oh.
There we go.
There we go.
Oh, look at me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
No, Andrew's still here.
Later. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye, good night.
Okay, we're at item number 3, 2 Parkway Drive, continuation of public hearing. Is there someone here to represent that?
It's also,
Sorry.
Well, they did not get their new plans in on time.
Yeah, I remember.
So this should be adjourned to 11:05.
Sorry, I'm still.
Telling them.
And it's a public hearing, so you'll have to vote on adjourning it.
I make a motion that we adjourn
Okay,
12 Parkway Drive to the next November 5th meeting. You have a second?
yep, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Did we hear from anybody there?
Yes, they tried to submit plans like yesterday, so tell them
Oh, it was not.
a little late.
Right, okay, all right. Item number 4 on our agenda, 189 Broadway, continuation of pre-submission conference for proposed minor subdivision and new townhouses. I see Javier is here.
Revenge is sweet.
Somewhere, here he is.
Okay, Javier, could you please unmute yourself?
Very good, thank you. So Javier, wow, all right, takes a little bit to get the right exposure. Anyway, good evening, everybody, Chairman and members of the board. Javier de la Garza from De la Garza Architecture here to present on behalf of Ernest Howell and his family and townhouse development at 189 Broadway. We had this is of course a pre-submission hearing. So from our last meeting with you all a couple of months ago, we heard some of your concerns about the site, about the views, of course, and we're mostly, I think the request was to see more, right? Basically that the plans were a little preliminary and perhaps too preliminary, and you'd like to see a little more what the massing was, how it addresses Broadway and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
If you have trouble, I have a solution.
Okay, I need your solution.
Okay. Okay, tell me if you can do that now.
Oh, here we go. All right. Very good. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yep. Got it.
All right. I'll go to full screen. So I'm going to review this quickly. Obviously, you all probably know where the site is here, along Broadway, further down near Livingston. And this is a, little more close-up view. So the major features of the site, you have smaller homes on Livingston coming around. One of the larger homes is 189. This is the property that's being subdivided, and adjacent we have Sussex Hall, which of course is completely different scale than what these are. What I think Laura mentioned last time was the wooded area, and that remains, that's of course part of this property here, Sussex Hall. And there are some wooded areas here that come up there. There's a stone wall bordering that right at the property line there. All right. So here's, I'll just review these quickly. So this is basically on the north side of 189 that'll be subdivided up against this 6-story building, 6-story plus. And so we do have, what's a repeated concern is the scale. Here we're kind of navigating between, even this house is sort of dwarfed by this large building here. This is, a view here from the south, you can see. So basically we're subdividing this, the property kind of comes back in a little behind this. So we're proposing 4 townhouses, 3 along this line here and 1 behind. This is a, there is a view shed right here from Broadway. It's of course kind of not super clear, but there is a great, view here across this lawn that we're trying very hard to preserve. I'm going to zoom in here. I think this one is kind of key, and even though these are satellite images, so the buildings are not quite on the property line, but you can see the idea of scale that basically, this is a typical house, this is a large house, even a larger house, and then there's this, and this is really what we're calling 4 houses here. So the scale of these 4 houses really is, relatively small, smaller than really any house in this image, at least in plan, right? These are just some of the views, right? There's the view we mentioned, there's 189 Broadway, the terrace looking out, you know, and here's the property adjacent. So here's our plan. This is basically showing some of the calculation of steep slope. Primarily, it gets quite steep over here, this green, and falls off, you know, as we go down this way. This is all relatively flat and, you know, no reductions here. There's a little bit of a dip right here. So this, of course, we know our first approval or request for approval would be, actually, I'll just stop on this moment here. So basically there are some trees here. The X's indicate the trees that would be removed. Some of these are locusts and really kind of beyond their life. There's one here, a large maple that's been trimmed and is really kind of a lollipop shape right now. It goes up probably about 5 stories and has, you know, I think there's some concern about how tall it is. These represent trees that we're retaining. You know, you can see quite a few back in here that sort of blend into this wooded area back here. There's one here that we might replace with something a little more, a little bigger. This one actually still is on the property line, though it's, you know, quite close to this one. And then the green is where we're proposing to add new trees. And, you know, part of not filling this up with trees here, of course, is to preserve that view through there. This drive here, you know, we did review, as I mentioned last time, with the fire department, and basically getting a truck in here and preserving the, you know, the slope that they require and the width. This is the subdivision plan, right, for townhouses. Every townhouse, which in this time we're coming back with a very clear townhouse arrangement. Every parking, every terrace, everything is, it's less of a shared kind of communal arrangement in terms of the parking. Each lot has its own, you know, owns the property below it and, you know, up to the sky. So these are the 4 lots plus the 5th, you know, homeowner association that sort of surrounds everything. Can everybody see my screen? All right, so this is the garage level. So again, the sloping here, we talked a little bit about pavers, and we'd be, you know, planning to comply, of course, with the impervious area. We're well within the lot coverage with building and with impervious. We've reduced some of the terraces here, kind of pulled them back a little bit again to preserve more green. We put, you know, greenery up here. We don't have a landscape architect yet, but the idea is that, you know, there would be plenty of green here, but without obstructing the view. One of the requests before was basically how to treat this and the frontage. So most of the entries are from the back. You see these little passages that go through, and the front door is really sort of around the side for these 2 units. So every unit is quite unique. There's the entrance for that one. And then unit A, which is here in the front, we're basically entering on the corner, and you'll see why in a minute. So this is a typical floor, basically the 2nd and 3rd floor on these units. And then this is the roof top unit. So we do have quite a bit of open area, both for terrace and, you know, basically to comply with, these are, you know, we believe these are totally compliant with the height requirements, and, you know, to allow these openings through here for views from the neighboring building.
No, I don't think so.
This is a sort of view from the south. So you can see it stepping down. There are terraces that are partly sunken. This is the drive coming down here, garage, and then another drop, and the other 2 garages here. This is the Broadway elevation here, and there's Sussex Hall on this side. This is unit D, so even this one is, you know, complying with the sky exposure plane. The ground does drop off, but we're within that. Okay, so I'm going to unshare this one. Let's see if I can figure this out. These are a series of views here. So this is, I mentioned that the entrance on A, which basically this is turned and oriented to Broadway and has some, fairly modern but contemporary in design, I guess, but I pick up some scale and features of the others. It's very preliminary, of course. So I'll just go through these one at a time. This is coming up Broadway. This is shown, these are the trees that are here, which would, of course, obscure some of the view of that. And you can see, some of the scale relationship. Is the existing hedge, along the sidewalk, and then it's sort of pulled away, of course, for the driveway. This is without the greenery. So this is sort of coming up Broadway. So it turns out this drive is actually pretty much aligned with, I guess, the spring equinox. So you would get really for 5 to 6 months of the year, you would get sunlight coming right in here in the morning between 6 and 9. That's the view. So the drive, of course, is stepping down. The garage is stepped down. As you come around, there's a view looking back now to the south.
Here, what's the distance between these houses and Sussex Hall?
So the setback is 10 feet on this side. We are 24 feet at the garage level. You can see that there's a little bit of an overhang here on these. So we're basically 21 feet at the closest point on, to the south.
From the building?
From the property. The building is probably another 10 to 12 feet beyond that. So this is sort of an aerial up above. Of course, you never quite see this, but at least you can get a better idea of the massing up above of what's happening. This is, now from the lawn area, looking back at that.
It's interesting because when I look at this elevation versus the other elevations, it seems like this elevation obstructs about 30% of this building next door, where the other elevations, it doesn't, it seems to only obstruct like 2 floors, which would be like 20%. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's sort of a basement level here, and I assume, I've never been in the building, but there are these apartments, so we're roughly, at about the height of this 3rd floor, and that's, as they're
about 30% of the tenants that live on that side of the building, that, but 30% of the apartments or rentable space, whatever you want to call it, for that building to be obstructed by these units, by this mass. Just saying, it's just the way that I see this, the volume of this,
Right.
of buildings.
I mean, my house is, 12 feet away from my neighbor, so it's, I suppose, a little relative. But yes, it's going to be a change, no doubt.
And also, when in the plan, when I look at the volume of these buildings, and how you show them, there's no way that you have the view of the river that you have now anymore. Like, basically, you won't have a view from Broadway. In the perspective of how you would stand on the sidewalk and see between the existing home and the foliage or the trees that are existing now, you'll never get that view with these buildings there. Basically, all you're going to see is buildings, and then hopefully the house and the people that live there will have the backyard space and the view of the river.
You're talking about for the village to look to the river? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we had, part of why this entry is notched like that is to, have a little more view. We had calculated at one point, I haven't done it recently, but, I was trying to figure out how do you calculate this? Obviously, it is going to block some of the view. There are a lot of trees right here that, this is, you can see the swing set. This is a huge magnolia that's blocking the view.
That view right you're showing, that you're speaking of.
Oh, sorry. Right here is this is a big magnolia tree right here. This one
I
actually right
see,
here.
I see a facade with,
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me switch the screen I'm sharing.
yeah,
All right, so here's an overgrown magnolia. Here, trees here. So, I think your view is not, for argument's sake, if we're,
so right now,
at what point could you start getting a view along the sidewalk? That seemed to be the
Right.
best.
right now, when you get a view on the sidewalk is where the archway is, which is probably, if you bring your mouse over to where yep, right there.
Yeah.
Like that view is basically what you see when you're standing on the sidewalk and you see across. If you go, directly to the river north or whatever that direction is.
Mhm.
And right now, all those buildings block. So basically you don't really have any view anymore once you construct those buildings. And if you try to go to the right, which is hedges, then you still don't have a view. You're basically obstructing all the view from anyone that wants to enjoy that on that sidewalk, in my opinion.
So
Because
it
I've
sounds
walked
like
there.
the hedge, sounds like the hedge is doing a bit of blocking. I mean, you can see over it for sections and others not, so if this hedge were brought down, then of course you would get that view over it. I have some photos to pull
I
up.
mean,
But,
it's extremely very minimal when you really try and do a directional thing.
Mhm.
Because if I try and go like this, then you're gonna hit the original, the existing building at some point. It's a very marginal view, and I just personally think that it's extremely massive, this whole development. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I think it's a little over the top. And I also think that taking away so much of the trees and the beauty of what's there now, and the buildings, I mean, they're great buildings as far as a design, but do they fit within the context of why this existing historic home is here? I don't think so. In my opinion, I don't think that it works. So I'm just saying.
yeah, I think we're mediating between two, older structures. And, the intention is not to be, kitsch and copy and, try and duplicate this stuff and do an historic home here. These are townhouses and, historic townhouses would never look like this. You don't really want, San Francisco townhouses on here anyway. So it's,
No, and I
it's a
understand.
challenge. Yeah.
I understand that, but also think about okay, so now we have cars driving up and down the side of this building. Like, how many apartments, or what's the quality of life for those people that are living there? Can they open their windows? Can they, is there an issue like at Mercy College when they were speaking about the neighbors complaining about light and noise? How are those things considered for our neighbor? Like tonight I walked on the aqueduct and I looked at the new project Christina did against the other apartment complex. And I was thinking about your project and I thought, this project literally wraps around this building and the cars are up against this building. That project, even though there is a driveway, it's a lot more distance and the parking's in the back. So it doesn't conflict with the neighboring building. So, I mean, I think we need to be a little bit more conscientious about how we all live in this community and what we want to feel as a quality of life. And I just feel like the way that these cars come in this driveway, and now the driveways here, parking is very limited. So now we're also eliminating parking spots. And I know parking, shouldn't be an issue, but it is. And, and the height of these buildings, I mean, the height of these buildings basically takes away almost 4 stories of 3 stories at least of this building, of everybody that lives on this side and the back of this one section of this building. And I think it's a little bit too much. I would love to see, I like the architecture. I like the trying to, and I shouldn't be commenting about architecture, but I like the use of the brick and making it a little more modern. I'm not disclosing that at all. All I'm saying is I think this is being a little bit disrespectful to a neighbor and environmentally not being conscious about what we're trying to preserve in our community. And, we had something in front of the board, a parking lot at Cabrini that took months and months and months. And I don't even know if it still is resolved, but it was parking spots because we couldn't see the river. And now we're building these massive buildings. And I just don't even know how to comment, that's.
So I'll just mention a couple of things. One is that well, obviously, so these are going to be 8 cars in here. I think they're taking up, the curb cut is 2 parking spaces. It is a very crowded thing, so there was an insistence to, obviously every unit needs its own parking. There was Mr. Howell's interested in a lot of sustainable practices here in terms of, ground source heating, solar, I think it's been mentioned, and, here the electric car charging and so forth. So I know there was a comment about fumes and so forth. I really don't see that. There's really not a place to park outside and, you're obstructing your neighbors. This is sort of commercial width of backing up, which is what is determining the 24-foot setback, is dictated to us. Most, residences don't have that. So there's, I hear what you're saying in terms of the distance and so forth. I don't think this is going to be a nasty, alley. This is really, it's being designed as a muse. We're introducing, greenery where we can. And I guess the question comes up to, I hear what you're saying about the size and the views blocking, but, at what point is it, does an owner have the right to develop his property, for his family and to preserve the views of renters who, had views and then they don't, and I think we're not right up against it. I don't think this is like, really offensive construction here. It's there will be a lot of design thought given to what this elevation is and what people are looking at, and the colors and the design of that, sort of a European scale, kind of a vernacular. A lot of buildings are 3.5 story or whatever, and in villages, and you don't find them offensive and offensive to look at or offensive to look across the street at. So it's not wide open views of the Hudson, but it is, it will be made as nice as possible.
First of all, I want to concur with several things that Laura said. Including the fact that I think the architecture is beautiful, even though I know that that's not. And I think the drawings you did, Javier, the 3-dimensional views and so on are beautiful, actually. And I really, as an architect, I appreciate that. I guess but let me to the other issues about the impact on the building, the adjacent building. I hate to say this, but didn't you, because it seems like maybe you'll feel like it's a big step backwards, or maybe we misdirected you. Didn't you have at one point an alternative, another site plan that actually put the buildings sort of more in a location that was sort of more towards the back of the existing house. Wasn't there an earlier study that, and maybe you even entered the site from the south side? Am I not remembering this correctly?
So you are actually, so so this is the model in terms of.
Do you have that? Do you have any of that? Like even the plan? I mean, I know you didn't get to a point where you modeled it in 3 dimensions, but do you have the site plan? Any more of that?
Yeah, I do have it. So I wasn't ready ready to present that.
I know it's not what you wanted to show. I'm just.
But
curious.
let me show something else here. Actually, I didn't share this one. All right, so this is the what I was talking about before. So I think, Rob, to your point, what the other scheme was it was basically 2 3-family homes, which is also a permitted use here. These were sizable homes, again, you know, and the parking was, I don't want to say off-site, but it was basically off of this site. So I mean, it's an entirely different direction.
No, I know, I know, but I'm wondering now to Laura's concerns, which I
But yeah, the driveway went around the back.
yeah, that's what I remember. Maybe
Yeah.
even,
But didn't the fire department have a problem with that?
There was.
Yeah, they had issues with accessing the back unit. Basically, there was, you know, it was dividing the site. Let me pull up the other. So basically, it was, you know, imagine these 2 buildings, the same volume really right here. And then these 2 kind of joined here. So it was basically, you know, putting it here on Broadway. This is a 3-family house, and this was a 3-family house. And the parking was all tucked in under here. That
Right.
proved to be kind of infeasible on a number of levels. You know, all of this, which is existing driveway and so forth, was a challenge, you know, fire truck access and how they would come in and get to the back unit and so forth. So, you know, I think we hit a number of issues with that approach.
unsolvable in your opinion? Because I do feel like it might, if there was some way to make it work, putting the, you know, treating it as 2, what did you say you were allowed by zoning? 2?
3-family houses, yeah.
Yeah. Somehow a little compound of 3-family houses, I somehow feel like that might be, would kind of relieve some of the pressure on the adjacent building and some of the pressure on the views. I don't know.
I mean, that was a total, so that requires 12 parking spaces. So this whole zone here was going to be really a underground parking lot, or partly underground. You know, the lawn was lifted.
Right, I remember.
So all these cars, there was, you know, dry sprinkler systems and all kinds of elaborate stuff. And, you know, ultimately people would have to walk from this corner of the property all the way across these cars and all the way up to get to, you know, these, this house in front. So, you know, it was not a, it was a very communal, we'll say, kind of approach, and, you know, demanded a lot, I think, from the residents.
Javier, is this project feasible if in this form that you're showing us now, if you do not develop Lot A?
Which one is Lot A?
It's the green one.
I think the intention is to have 4 townhouses. I mean, everything's set up for that. There's enough property for that. So I can't say what, you know, I don't think it's being done for, you know, economic return. This is for the family.
But they'll probably rent it out. They're
They may, yeah.
I can't believe that a family would live there.
No, communally or whatever, but anyway, so in terms of, the question was basically, is it feasible? So, you know, I don't know that it's a dollar and cents decision, all of this, you know, I think they're building really for the very long term.
No, I'm just seeing that Lot A is probably, in terms of the view and you know, blocking views and the impact on the apartment building is probably more of an impact and more impact on the views than the other units. So it just was you know, just a question.
Actually, I think A is actually the least obstructive to the views that, are being discussed, which is out to the Hudson. So, I think the view here looking at Broadway is, so, I mean, if we're trying to, appease the renters or the owners of this building here, that's, to me, that's not a super desirable thing, whether you move in and you look at, I guess you'd be looking across this lawn to Broadway or looking at this house. But I think
Right.
that
It
the money
is-
shot is,
But I think what Steve is saying is that that's the most obstructive view from Broadway for the community.
right. I think, so the previous version did actually have this, this was trimmed back, sort of like it was, more like this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that the concern was it was now architecturally too much, a child of this thing and not relating to the street. So,
Right.
Just another idea is, would you want a cantilever over the driveway at all?
I think that it comes into issue. So we do cantilever out a little bit here.
Uh-huh.
But, I think we are still, with the fire truck coming down here, you don't want to
Oh,
take
gotcha.
chances. Yeah. In fact, that's why we pulled this one back and it's really going straight up.
Because you need a big fire truck to put out those fires in the apartment building.
Well, that's, we thought it was a pumper truck, but I was corrected that it's really a ladder truck to get back here.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically that's going to service the apartment building in terms of a fire, which is a good thing, because otherwise the fire truck can't get in there.
That's true.
Well, I think it's interesting you guys are focusing on Lot A, because for me, Lot D is the most problematic. It blocks the primary views from the adjacent building. It blocks the views down the driveway, and wrapping around the other building with these townhouses. That's the part that seems the most intrusive to me. So I'm surprised that everyone's interested in Unit A. Perhaps I'm missing something.
Well, just a question, it's just an idea that we talk about.
Because we talked about the most recent building built just down on the next block, by the Christina Griffin designed, and it's a long, narrow building that sits between two adjacent buildings, one of which is also large in scale.
Right.
And everyone seems to be relatively happy with that outcome. So that's why if you remove Unit D from this equation, you're starting to approach a similar sort of massing arrangement. Just my take on it.
No, it's true. It does open up another view to the river down that street, which that's a nice window to the river. You're right.
But I also feel like that building that you're speaking of, Alan, is the parking is in the back of the building, where the parking here is on the side of the building. So there is a difference between what activity could happen that could relate to the neighboring building. So in other words, like the one you're speaking of, all the cars go down and they park in back of the building, and that's on the aqueduct side. So really there is no kind of impact on the neighboring building, where I feel like in this situation, there's cars coming in and parking in a garage, and maybe have people over and then they park there and there's noise. And so it's slightly different. I think if there was a solution possibly where that parking kind of thing wouldn't happen, or the noise or whatever doesn't impact the building next door, it would be a better solution. I don't know how that works.
I believe the driveway needs a 10-foot setback from the side property line.
I think it's the parking. And that's, I think that's against,
Let me check. I think it's driveway too.
So if somebody has an internal parking garage, which is what is proposed here, it only needs how much of a setback?
So basically, the building requires a 10-foot setback. And it's only because we're putting the parking there and the fire lane that we have it. It's really the parking that we need 24 feet behind the garage. So 24 feet is clear from the garage level, going back to like what's actually a retaining wall, which is another 2 feet from their wall, which is 12 feet or something from their building. So
There will be,
we're about 36 feet, let's say, from the garage to the lower level of this building, this basement level.
and you're proposing to build a retaining wall?
Well, there's a retaining wall there, I guess an older stone retaining wall, and we're just supporting it from our side. So we're leaving a buffer that's going to have plantings on it, basically along that side.
Mhm.
Javier, what's the approximate square footage of each of these units?
It's the footprint is 1,000 square feet roughly. The lot coverage, so in the order of
And
1,000
there's
square feet.
2.5.
Yeah, 2 and a little bit on the garage level, and a little bit on the little bonus room, really study at the top.
Thanks.
So we're at 2,400, let's say.
Is there if you created, I mean, I know from a marketing point of view, this isn't desirable, but if you had, as you did in the other scheme, a kind of quasi-remote parking lot, if you didn't try to park under each unit and the whole thing dropped down that much, the amount of room that you're making for the parking level, and the parking was consolidated as a little lot somewhere else on the property, I don't know how it would work. How much would that lower the buildings? And
Well, I think so one issue is, I think so the previous submission and, those kind of questions, if the parking is not on the lot, I don't know if that is still a townhouse. Basically, now you're talking about Ed, do you care to opine on that?
I'm sorry, I was searching.
Yeah, if you have a townhouse, does the parking need to be on the property since you've gone to the trouble of owning this lot?
So the building has to be on its subdivision, but you could have parking off on the common space. I believe it's been done many times.
huh,
So one thing, by not having it below, you basically, well, I guess you risk overstepping the impervious surface. Assuming you have the same footprint of building.
Right, that would come into play. Additionally, you're right up against the impervious surface max, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. So yeah, the 24 feet of driveway, even at with pavers and so forth, is we're figuring at 50% or whatever. We're still figuring we're very close to that limit.
You have what, your pervious pavers are 15% permeable?
We haven't actually decided on one yet, but I think there's some provisions for that. We know we can't do gravel.
You can do permeable pavers.
Javier, is there any way, have you looked at getting 4 of these units in a row? So you could still get 4 units and not wrap around the adjacent property?
I don't think we've looked at that. They do get quite narrow.
You had a view of the property from overhead that showed the property line and the buildings on it. There we go.
Yeah. So basically coming to here, we're approaching this guy, we'd have to stay back, I guess, I don't know what the rear yard setback, you know, it gets tricky here when you do all this and what's a rear yard and a front yard and a side yard. And plus this bizarre little jog. So no, we did not really look at that. It's just being a straight shot.
And how much does the property slope down at that point?
It slopes down very steeply over here. This is really the steepest slope. And here, yeah, this is pretty much from here to here is pretty even. I mean, meaning it, I think it's probably about a 10, so this is probably about a 12-foot drop off. There's 220 up here. So, and then you get another, 10-foot drop off to this corner here.
So it could be possible that you do, like Alan said, possibly a straight 4-unit that way rather than wrapping around.
Yeah, I think if we can count this as a side yard. And up here, I think we're, basically we were told, I think, back in this early submission that basically where this thing could be, could it move up? Is this a prevailing front? So I think pushing this up and this one down, you could make that work.
Just a odd question, like why would we put anything on the property over to the left here? Like, I say left.
Over here?
More over to the left, continue to where the existing driveway and then back. Like, why couldn't we develop something back here as a unit? And then like, instead of having like this row of things, of units, why couldn't we have something
Yeah,
that?
I mean, the first reason is the view from this fantastic covered terrace.
Porch, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this is Mr. Howell's porch. You had a
Right.
lot of fantastic gatherings. And so basically we're, dividing the property and, leaving adequate, lot coverage, building coverage and so forth here. That's what's determining this line.
And this property doesn't slope down enough to be able to build something that would be complementary to the existing home?
Sorry, could you say that again? Which one?
So I'm just throwing this out here. So instead of building this kind of like a row townhouse type thing, could it possibly be little units along the property that complement the existing house rather than having this massive kind of townhouse look? Just asking.
Well, I think that's more in the architecture of it. You don't have the height and, obviously the garage under it. It's sort of a major element. But I think, if these were to really look like individual houses, if that's a scale question.
Yes. I
don't
mean,
think
that's kind of what I'm asking. I'm like, does it need to be this massive townhouse type looking thing, or can it be 4 individual nicely placed units on this property that complement the existing property rather than something that's
Well, they need to, so we're not permitted to do multifamily here. And we're not permitted to put 4 separate buildings here. So we are permitted to do townhouses. So originally I was talking about, cluster and so forth, which, it seems to be cluster is kind of linked to townhouses and so forth. But my reading of cluster had been basically it allows, kind of wider purview for these, more creative approaches of setbacks and so forth, more of a communal thing, which is what the idea of that is that everybody is sharing this, fantastic lawn, all of these people, and including, possibly, that building and this building. So you have a total of, 4, this is a 3-family house here. so you had to have 7 families that are basically able to all use, this great lawn.
Okay, I'm just asking. So where do we go from here?
Well, you've heard a lot of ideas, Javier. I don't know whether moving the tan one up front has any appeal, but
All right, well, let me speak with Mr. Howell, and I'm sure he's listening or will listen to this and get his thoughts on what we might come back with.
Okay.
All right, thank you all very much.
thank you.
Thank
Appreciate the
you.
comments.
Thank you, Javier.
Okay, okay, for real fun. Next item, number 5, 58 Colonial, referral from the Board of Trustees to review construction of a retaining wall on village right of way. It's a new subject for us. This will be fun.
So I'm promoting Patty to panelist. Patty, can you unmute yourself? Oh, good. There you go. Patty?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, that's a good sign. And okay, it's saying that host has just.
Hey, co-host, you should try now.
Yep, that looks better. And slideshow. And from the beginning. So can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Fine. I hope that some of you were able to get out to the site and look at where we flagged the property line.
Yes,
I saw it today.
I did.
Yeah.
So basically what we're looking at is there are 2 retaining walls that were rebuilt on the property. One is up against the house. It's not really any issue with the issue with being in the public right of way. The other one is this one that's down on the west line of the property. It's out a couple of feet into the right of way. It's been there for quite a long time. It had rotted out in sections, and so the owners of the property replaced it. And the third component is the steps here that there are existing steps that we were planning to rebuild. So we would like to be able to do that. And just one of the things that we've noticed is that there is a lot of this, not only on this street, but around the village. And we did try to find examples of where this is, where this licensing process with the Board of Trustees works. And it was actually a little bit hard to find. There are many examples of where this board granted permission with the understanding that a agreement would be prepared acceptable to the village attorney. But I think we're already way down the path on this. We've been referred to you by the Board of Trustees. And they are, at this point, are looking for your recommendations on whether or not what the provision should be for them to be allowed to leave the existing retaining wall and the set of steps in the walkway. We had proposed building a very low retaining wall along here to keep the hillside from washing down on the sidewalk. But all comments that we have gotten are suggesting that we move it back onto the property. And I think we already went through why we don't think that's a great idea from the standpoint that we'd have to take down a number of trees. And at this point, the homeowners would they'd be willing to just abandon that effort. So if that's not something that people want, then there's no reason to do it. We've got other stuff we can show. We've been to the Architecture Review Board. They've seen this, they've approved it. This is the extent of the set of stairs and the railing. There was a retaining wall that was here that we have, proposed removing and sliding the steps back, but these steps are still on the village right of way. The challenge of pushing these steps back further, you can see, it just is an issue with how that really works with the driveway. I guess there's always a way of doing something. So if this board is not interested in, having us be able to build it back where it was, I guess then we would be trying to see if we can make this safe, that people would walk up the slope a little bit before they got to the steps. But it's kind of what your call is. I've got obviously a lot of photos that we can show, but I think you've already seen that in real life. So unless you want to see them, I would say that's pretty much the extent of what the question is.
Well, I think from a legal point of view, I guess we need to talk about this, but I think from a realistic point of view, in my mind, this is ridiculous. Most of us live on a street. Those of us that live in a house on a street we probably don't know where our legal line, where the legal line is, but we very carefully take care of what goes down all the way to the curb line. We consider that part of our responsibility to do that. The village doesn't want to do it, I'm sure. And I think here is the same thing. These people are trying to do something that makes sense to protect the corner here. And seems like they should be able to get an approval to do it without going through all this trouble. But I understand the rule is a rule.
My take on it and seeing it was that the existing location of the wall, or the proposed location for the wall, matches up with the western section that they rebuilt, which beautifully joins the adjacent properties wall. If you move that wall in, you're going to kill those two trees. Maybe you could try and save them, but they're not going to make it. You're going to take away half the root ball. So it's extremely disruptive, both visually and, from a supporting those trees standpoint, to move the wall far enough in to be off the village right of way. So in this case, I would have to say there's got to be a really, really important reason from the village legal standpoint to make that happen, because I think from every design standpoint, it's a negative.
Yeah, well, from a reality standpoint, I mean, the village doesn't want to come here and do all this work and maintain it and cut the grass and everything. So.
Those two magnolia trees are probably two of the most beautiful trees on the block in the spring. So, I think if they can move the wall in a little bit, but not harm the root ball, I think it's really important to preserve those trees. This is on the eastern section of the wall that they were thinking about abandoning. I think it would be useful to have a little, one or two railroad ties there, just so the soil doesn't wash onto the sidewalk. But I tend to agree with both Alan and Steve that they just, this is, like I said in the last meeting, the property line and the village property, what people have done on Colonial Avenue and the village property line really sort of weaves in and out. If you look down below, lower on the west of Colonial Avenue, all the rest of the properties have their railroad ties right on the edge of the sidewalk. So I agree with Alan that just, do what they can to try to get closer to the village property line, but just be able to get.
Well, how bothered do you do that? I think do it what makes sense so that you're not washing. I don't see that make any sense.
Well, I certainly agree. How about Rob?
I agree. When we did our house renovation, we had a survey done, and I almost fell off my chair when I saw where our property line was relative to our curb. There must be 6 feet of lawn and curb that we've built and other stuff we've landscaped that is in the right of way. I think it's just everywhere in the village. I mean, I defer to Ed and everyone else about whether or not some additional legal thing is required. But I think it's just ubiquitous in the village, and I agree with the chair.
It is, Rob, but it's not ridiculous that we control these things. So
I agree.
It's okay for you and then to recommend to the Board of Trustees that this should stay where it is. That's okay, but we have to control it because unlike Stephen says, you as a property owner have to maintain the village right of way. Doesn't matter whether the village lets you build on it or not. You have to maintain it by code and by law. But you also need permission from the village to build on it, to put anything on it. So if you look at some sections of the village, because this wasn't controlled, we see 8-foot-high stone retaining walls out to the curb line, wrapped around telephone poles and fire hydrants.
Yeah.
So at that extremity, that extreme is just dangerous to everybody driving by. So
what do you think is I mean, I agree with you that there's a point where it's too much. So I guess
we have to go through the process. If you think this is fine where it is, there's still a sidewalk there for people to go by, then fine.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there has to be a process. We don't ignore one and then enforce the other.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with you, Ed.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to protect those trees. They're really beautiful trees.
So write that recommendation to the Board of Trustees and then they'll decide.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this circumstance, I'm ready to support the wall where they intended. And I guess the stairs also.
Me too.
I am too.
Great.
I guess we should just have somebody figure out what the language should be so that it satisfies Ed's legitimate concern that we're, like, I don't know if it's one of those things where we say this isn't a precedent, or I don't know what it is, but I mean, it maybe it needs to be more than just saying, oh, sure, it's fine. So there might be a couple of whereases that have to be put into the
You
resolution.
could say that it's preserving, trees and open space, and it's also still allowing, a sidewalk passageway and retaining soil to keep it from washing down the road.
I'm sure Dan has a bunch of whereases that he can use, saved up over time. In a way, we are starting a precedent, but I think it's the opposite. Before people became more cognizant of this, which I appreciate that Ed is, it was kind of like the Wild West. People would do what they wanted to do, and sometimes it would be enough of a problem that the village would have to step in. When I went through the approval processes, there really are very few times where the village had a process that gave permission for people to do it. It's usually where somebody's trying to build actually more of a structure or create parking that's actually on the public right of way. I know we had that up on Bradley. Paul Petretti had something. I think we've done that over on Northfield. The idea is, I guess, starting the precedent that people, when they have improvements that they want to make in the village right of way, there should be a standard, easy, straightforward procedure for them to be able to sign an agreement with the village that gives the village control over it. Because the concern that was expressed to me by one of the village staff was that if somebody goes and makes this improvement and then the village wants to do something and comes and tears out the improvement, do the people feel that they were wronged? And obviously it's like an easement where you give somebody permission to do something and you reserve the rights. So it's
we're going way far afield of where we should be, I think, as far as the planning board's concerned. The planning board isn't setting any kind of precedents. I think the recommendation ought to be limited to the items that they were discussing. It'll be up to the Board of Trustees to determine what, implementation measures they need in terms of, liability or insurance or whatever. But I think it's sufficient for the planning board's recommendations to be as to the planning nature of it as opposed to the legal nature of what's being proposed. And I think the board is in favor of that. It sounds like.
Okay.
Just to sort of summarize, there's, we're going to send a letter, I think, from the chairman is all that's needed. It's not a formal action that the
Right.
planning board met on such and such a date and recommended that the proposed improvements and the existing improvement be approved as submitted. Now, that may not be true for the new retaining wall up by where the magnolias are, which they have listed up to 30 inches high, which we're all concerned about damage to the tree roots. But a lower retaining wall, maybe not 30 inches high, might help set the edge of the property there and not damage the magnolias. So
Yeah, what we actually said is not to exceed 30 inches in height, because 30 inches is where you're required to have a permit. Lower than that, you don't need one. Our idea is to have that be as absolutely low as it can be. And it's probably maybe 3 or 4 railroad ties high down where the stairs are. But by the time you're going halfway up the street, it's probably 2 railroad ties.
okay.
It's just enough to.
So what's the height of 3 railroad ties is about 18 inches? something?
24 inches.
What?
21 to 24.
Okay. So we can draft up something that says just about what that was, whereas, and special care has to be taken care to protect the roots of the magnolia.
Yeah, we were proposing not to cut anything. We were proposing actually to build it and actually, if anything, be able to add some loose soil behind it so that the roots would actually be able to be protected more.
So just to be clear, you don't need a permit for a wall under 30 inches on private property.
But part of that's in the public right of way?
Yes, that's why we're here.
Right.
Yeah.
So it needs approval from the Board of Trustees to be on the public right of way. So we could, I could take a shot at drafting something and circulate it. And then it would be signed by the chairman once everybody's happy with it and sent off to the Board of Trustees. That's where we stand?
Thank you, Dwight.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Thanks, Dwight.
Thank you.
Want me to stop sharing my screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're not next. You are next.
Or Brad,
No. 4 Bradley Street, item number 6 on our agenda.
Is it,
or
are
Brad,
all participants? Okay, there we go. I'm going to promote Elliot to panelist.
Well, I see Mr. Senor has joined us.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, and the architect is supposed to be online too, I think.
We're not in charge of that.
Levesque.
Kira Levesque, the architect.
Ah,
there you go. Okay,
We're ready when you're ready.
Kira, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. May I share my screen?
sure.
Are you able to do so now?
Yes. So this application is for a rear 2-story addition to an existing single-family home at 4 Bradley Street in Dobbs Ferry. There are 2 other little additions, which are the doghouse dormers on the front of the building, which you can see in these elevations. Today, I submitted, as requested by both the Architects Review Board and the village engineer, the sky exposure plane, and this is what it comes out to be. Pretty unique when I did it. I said, well, I can build another whole building on top of this, but that's not the goal. And all of this information was taken off of Mr. Senor's topographic survey. So today's revisions, and I hope you have them, seem to be some conflict between my architectural plan and its patio and what was submitted on this site plan for stormwater calculations. So these little bubbles are clarifying and making my patio match what's on the site plan. So this dimension, and the removal in this area of the patio that I had go all the way up to the front now reflects exactly what was put on the site plan. Mr. Senor?
Yep. All right, if I can now, if you stop sharing, I can share my screen.
Are you able to do so now?
Yes. There we go. All right, so here is the site plan showing the one-story house, the proposed addition here in the rear, about 12.5 feet, and then a 10-foot by 44'9" or thereabouts patio across the back, and returns down the side to the new existing addition. We're showing we've done our perk test and our calculations to show a Caltech system, the underground drywall system in this area here, which is the downhill side of the property. And it's out of the area of the travel way for the construction entrance. The calculations are here. It shows that we needed 4 or 2 rows of 2. Our calculations are based on 2 Caltex next to each other as opposed to a single row. When you do it as a single row, you're only taking into account the surface area of a single row, which is when you put them next to each other, there's no separation, so there's no additional absorption in the wall between the 2 Caltex. So we do it as a calculation for one next to each other, which is somewhat more conservative, I suppose. We put them in this area. We did get a memo from Han Engineering that had a list of almost 24 items. Most of them, I think, are paperwork, and certainly we can take care of everything that's on there. There's not a lot of things that are insurmountable. The one thing that is on there is a landscape plan, and as you can see, this project is in the back of the house, and we're not taking down any of the trees. We're actually preserving all the trees along the property line, and we're not taking down any existing trees that are there. And the owner wanted us to talk about not having to, since we weren't taking anything down, this is in a small addition in the back, didn't want to necessarily have to plant additional landscaping. She thinks that it's sufficient for their lifestyle and their project. Other than that, the 20 items here are easy enough to take care of either directly with Han Engineering or through the planning board, whatever you'd like. So that's it. The property is actually, we don't show the entire, one of the questions is we don't show the entire property on the site plan. We do show the entire property on the survey that was submitted. The property is 250 feet deep, and we're not disturbing anything past the silt disturbance line. And we in our legend, we call it the silt fence is also the area disturbance. But we're not disturbing anything like there. And in order to make it this part of the plan more legible, we blew up this part of the plan and didn't include the entire site, because in order to get a 250-foot plan on a 24-inch scale, you'd be at probably a 30 scale as opposed to the 10 scale, which makes it a little bit easier to read. So other than that, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
I don't know that area well, but I've been by there today. It looks like
I'm not hearing it.
Couldn't hear you, Steve. I know that was the most ridiculous image of the sky exposure plane, but how about on the eastern side of the lot? Is that an existing condition? I guess it is, that you would work
Well,
with?
I don't think he correctly interpreted the sky exposure. It's a 6-point drawing with
Yeah.
several elevations of it. He just did front to back.
Yeah, I know. But that's in the architectural and historic review.
It is, but he should be aware that he's going to have to
Yeah,
going to have to do that, complete the other views, and make sure that they comply.
But if it's existing, I
Well,
guess,
it's
well,
not
he's making it higher,
proving
yeah.
the existing house is proving the addition.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I don't see a zoning table. Is everything conforming?
The zoning table is on the survey, and everything is conforming to setback requirements, et cetera. Yes, front, side, rear. The existing house on this corner here, the existing house is only 11.3 as we surveyed it, where 12 is required. So that's the reason for the building being set back about a foot off of the end of the house in order to achieve the 12-foot minimum setback.
Yes, gotcha.
Thank you.
And of course, the other side is at 19.4 on the new building.
So this one looks ready to set a public hearing on.
I think so.
Steve
Second.
Hunter, you have to speak up a bit. It's hard to hear you.
I move that we call for a public hearing at our next time, at the November
Second,
favor.
Aye.
Aye.
everyone.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see you in November.
Can you stop sharing your screen?
Could I just ask Elliot before we go? Did he submit electronic versions of the site plan and stormwater management?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. So that I can print them larger. I just
Mhm.
can't read these.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. We can submit hard copies or mail them to whoever needs them if,
No, as long as you submitted the digital.
all right. Well, we're gonna be revising it anyway, so no problem.
Okay.
Thank you. See you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda, we hold item number 8 now that we're moving up, 7 Fair Lawn Avenue, pre-submission conference site plan review for proposed new retaining wall. This is retaining wall night, I guess.
Yep, I'm gonna go get, let's see. So I'm promoting Mr. Fosner. Okay. There we go.
Hello. And then I know my engineers are also on the call. Alexander Barish, and I think there might be one other one.
Okay, I'll promote Alexander Barish and okay.
Alex can confirm who the other person would be if there's someone else we need to get on.
I see. I see. Okay. Everybody should be.
that would be it. No, that's SESI.
Mr. Barish, do you want to unmute?
Whoever's going to present,
Alex, if you're there, if you can hear us, you're muted and camera off.
Hi, this is Michael St. Pierre from SESI.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
I will be doing the bulk of the talking. Alex will be screen sharing some of the plans. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Michael, before you start, do you want me, and you and I haven't met, I'm Dan, the homeowner. Do you want me to just give a quick background on the project, and then I'll turn to you certainly for any plans and engineering work?
that would be great.
Sure. Well, many of you may be familiar with our property and the road we've been on for a long time now. We started last winter to put a pool in to our side property, something we've wanted to do since we built the house, or completely built the house 6 years ago, rather. As we started doing it, and there was plans to shore up the lower tier of this retaining wall, it started to sag. A larger plan was put together to really reinforce it. When that was begun, the upper two tiers began to sag, and I realized that the engineer and contractor were in way over their head. We put a kind of a stop to everything, and my wife and I started reaching out looking for engineers that really specialize in this kind of work, and that's where we got SESI. And so they put together this new plan that effectively replaces this three-tiered wall that's crumbling with a singular, much more sound wall. And they can talk through why we really don't have an option of replacing with the three tiers we have now. This, to be clear, I'm hoping we can still do a pool at some point. That's largely on hold because this is costing, probably 4 or 5 times what we ever thought we would spend on the pool just to repair the wall. So our goal is to get stability, make sure Fairlawn Avenue is secure and never falls into our yard, and that everything is sound. So that's really all we're looking for from my end as the homeowner. With, I guess, the one caveat of SESI has designed the wall so that the option of a pool is still preserved if we're ready to move forward with that after all this is done.
Good, thank you.
Sure. All right, so Michael and Alex, I think Alex, you should be able to share your screen, but I'll turn to you guys to talk through the plan that I think you guys also all have hard copies of.
Yes, Mr. Barish asked if he could share a screen. He should be able to.
Okay, so here's a picture of the wall. You can see in the middle of that, just to the left of the machine, where the wall is sagging there. So there you go. Alex, why don't you put up the pool? Or okay, that's the retaining wall plans that we're talking about doing. So the existing wall is a triple tier modular block wall with geogrid reinforcement. The high side is Fairlawn Avenue here, with the low side being the pool, where the pool will be going. So the wall has started to fail from the bottom, and as all three tiers have shown movement of the wall. In order to replace these walls, an excavation would need to be made back further than the property line in order to create a safe slope in which to be able to construct a new wall, traditionally, to replace these walls in kind. Again, that would require part of Fairlawn Avenue to be disrupted and dug up. So it was determined that the best solution here was to construct a retaining wall using top-down methods. And what that consists of is a drilled-in soldier pile wall with timber lagging. So that can be done from the top down and doesn't require excavation beyond the limits of the proposed wall. So it would not interfere with anything in Fairlawn Avenue. That would require the work to be done from up top, partially in Fairlawn Avenue. But it would not undermine or damage Fairlawn Avenue. I believe my partner Ken Quazza, whose name is on the plans, and Alex Barish, who's also on this call, met with Ed Manley on June 15th to look at the situation, to discuss the conceptual plan that we're looking at here, and discuss the sort of the parameters of what could and couldn't be done. That's what we've proposed to replace the triple tier wall, and that would be again a drilled in pile wall with timber lagging in between to hold up the slope and the roadway.
Good. Well, too bad that the the first attempt didn't work.
Yeah.
You're telling me.
For sure.
So I understand there are some comments from the review engineer. I'm not sure how you would like us to or what you would like us to cover here in this meeting, or
Well,
if
you
it's
don't need to. I mean, George is on the call. I think typically you would respond to him, and in our next meeting, we'll be calling for a public hearing at our next meeting, and if those responses can get to George and he's satisfied with them, then we can move on at the meeting after that.
I have one question right now, Mr. Chairman. Is this wall, is this a temporary wall, the lagging wall, or is it a permanent wall?
It's a permanent wall.
So the wood lagging would be there. And how long is that intended to last, that wood lagging?
I did see your comment. I'm not sure on the exact length of time. It is a treated timber lagging, so it's not just your traditional, go to Home Depot and stuff that you would construct using in your house. So it's a treated material meant for a permanent wall like this that will last a long time. I don't know what a long time means, and that's certainly something that I can find out what the lifespan for that material is.
That'd be great. And then do you know what caused the issue for the sagging with the existing? Did you determine that?
I'm not sure we investigated that completely, but they were in the process of excavating for the pool and had to do a little sort of underpinning of the existing wall because the excavation was going down below that wall. And during that process, when they were excavating to get the underpinning in, it started to fail.
Yeah, I'll throw in again. I'm obviously not a professional in this, but the way it's been described to me is the plans kind of underestimated or didn't think through, I guess, the soil the right way, and the soil we have is like trying to dig a hole at the beach, and the sides start to cave in, and the sides in this case are underneath the existing walls, and there were lots of fingers pointed and reasons blamed, but we're looking to just fix it.
Understood.
Any other questions from the board, or otherwise I would move that we call for a public hearing at the next meeting. Is there a second? Please.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Right. I have just one question on your plan. I mean, I guess I have to look at the site, but I see it goes from 92 feet in front of the house to 70 feet about where the pool would be, would have been. And then the slope to the west is 60 feet. Does this just keep going down very precipitously there, or does it level out at any point?
It continues down to Metro North Railroad down below.
Okay.
Alex, do you have that overall plan to show that?
Oh, wow, yeah. Whoa.
So, but between
So you
where
want to
the
get this
pool-
right?
Yeah, between where the pool would be and Metro North, there's a concrete block retaining wall that's holding up that side yard.
Gotcha, wow.
And that series of soil nails that were put in all along that lower slope to protect it. And that hasn't obviously been any issues.
Okay.
I'm personally aware of.
Yeah, actually, that's pretty flat behind your house.
Yeah.
You got a spectacular view for sure. Wow.
An amazing view, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, then we will see you at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. The next meeting, if the next item, if he's still here, is 156 Palisade Street, continuation of pre-submission conference for site plan review, proposed new main multifamily building.
Okay. I'm promoting Patty to panelist.
There he is, he's back.
And I assume you can hear. Am I ready to share screen?
Yeah, you're on.
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
Well, maybe you're not on.
Well, I'm on. I need to share screen though, but
yes, it's now you should be ready.
okay. Yep, it looks like it. Okay, and this one I think is the one. And the slideshow from the beginning. So you can see the screen and you can hear me.
Yes.
Good. So since the last meeting, we got some really helpful comments, I think, at the last meeting. And a lot of what Rob had to say, you know, it kind of resonated with, I think we got a better understanding of some of the things that we're trying to do. So we made a relatively significant change in the way we were approaching it. Although some of the things that were important to us, we've retained, such as having an entrance to the building that provides all of the units to come in off the sidewalk and not having to walk around the building to get to an entrance. Walking up and down the street, you know, becomes clear that there are really two dominant kinds of buildings on the street. One is like the two flanking this, which are like effectively large houses that are actually multifamily. And then you've got other buildings on the street that are truly small apartments. So we're trying to bridge that, and we're trying to accommodate a lot of the ideas that the board has pressed. So I'll just kind of go into it. What we've done is, I might as well go down to this one. What we've done is we have located the front entrance 10 feet setback from the street with a mast that kind of brings attention to that. We have then set the next portion of the building back with a porch in front. So that's there is a 10-foot setback here, a 9-foot setback to the rest of the building. And this portion of the building is about 38 feet wide. So that 40-foot maximum for the width, I think we're doing good with how that all works. The idea of having a driveway on the side, I think, you know, we have to deal with, are we putting parking on the site? And I don't think we can, I don't think the owner wants to do it without parking. And I don't think the neighborhood wants us to do it without parking. So we've looked at the idea of keeping the 6 parking spaces and doing it in a way that puts the parking garage not prominent on the front of the building, other than that you will see the driveway. But we lowered the whole area of the garage as much as we could and got it down to about elevation 105. which I think was one of the targets that was earlier, made. The difference is we're setting back much further than was previously thought to get down. So we're at a 10% slope instead of steeper. And you would be able to make out the garage door from the street, but I'll show you things that show that in better detail. This is our zoning tables. I'm sure you've gone and taken a look at it. We are at this point compliant, we believe, with everything on the building, with the exception of two things. The two things that are issues is, one is the proposed building coverage. We're proposing 39.99%, where the requirement currently is 27%. I know that you've introduced a concept that for the smaller lots, it's 40%, and then a sliding scale for the larger lots going down. But I think there's not that that's a flawed approach to have on it. I just think that there are other issues that probably are more important to the village that we should really take a look at. In terms of impervious surface coverage, the existing requirement limit is 54%, and we're just under 60%. And I would argue that given the fact that the 27 and the 54 were not right for this zoning district, I think we should be okay with that one piece. This is kind of just everything all in one sheet, but I've broken it down. So this is the plan. On the left side, you're seeing the plan. Here's the front entrance. You come into the entrance hall. You've got an elevator. You've got a half flight up to the units. You've got a half flight down, but we didn't provide an access from coming in the lobby to go down to the parking level except through the garage, since we're providing the ability to get into the garage from the exterior. The thought is, somebody's coming down the sidewalk to go into the garage, they'll go into the garage, not come through the lobby. The reason we have that is just to fit things in and not make it too convoluted inside. This shows the 6 parking spaces. We have the space that makes that not be a difficult one. Our driveway coming down flattens out in front of the door. We come in under a deck that's above. So the door is actually slid back. When we come in, we've got all of the turning radii that you need to have a garage. So this is an efficient way to do that. And with the exception that the door does face the street, I think it accomplishes much of what the board has previously talked about. The idea of having the entrance come in and the garage going down lower ends up with us basically having a split level in the building. This side where the elevator is, these 2 bedrooms and bathrooms above are several, it's basically a half flight above the kitchen, dining, living area and the deck for that unit. So if you came up from the first floor, you'd come up to this area, you'd come into the unit, and then to go to the bedrooms, you'd go up. Again, we might play with flipping these around, but that's not an issue for you. The back unit is 1 level. Our original goal was to have everything fully ADA compliant. Obviously, a split level doesn't do that, but 3 of the 6 units would be single level living with the elevator. I did include the top floor, just that there's one difference with it. When you get to the 3rd floor, we step back again and have a terrace there instead of the deck in front, so that keeps down the apparent height of the building. These 2 drawings kind of illustrate what I just talked about a little bit more. This building section on the left, this is the entry level, which you can see by the time you've gone back about 20 feet on the site, or from the entrance, which is 30 feet from the property line, you're basically in what would be the basement on that site due to the way the site comes up. You've got the half flight up at the 1st floor level at 115.5. Your garage is down at 105. This section here is showing how those spaces relate to the grade. The dash line here is actually the outline of the existing house and the existing grade. We're excavating down about 1 story with the 1st floor level above the garage. So that concern that was expressed that somehow we're building a garage and then building on top of it, I think this illustrates that we're trying to keep this down pretty well. And in the back, for example, the top of existing grade is around 123, and we've got a 105 garage. So we're 18 feet down from the grade at that point. This just kind of blows that up so that you can see it a little bit better. As you see here, this is the property adjacent, which is actually higher than the floor level of our raised part of the first floor. Is one of the reasons we thought the split level made some sense. Again, this one's just a blow up of what I talked about before. We are doing a retaining wall in the back to get this down so that the windows here and the little courtyard in the back off these units, that they've got usable backyard to do, recreation and nice place to sit. Okay, so this is the sheet that shows all the elevations. I don't think we need to go through all of them. Again, this is fairly schematic, but very specific. So this is the side elevation that's facing the house to the right as you face from the street. And what you can see is here's the portion of the building that's set back 10 feet. The deck that's adjacent to it sets back another foot, and this total is 9 foot coming back. So the front of this is 19 feet from the property line. And then on the third floor, it steps back again. So that this is actually back 26 feet from the property line. The front of this deck, which are the decks that are above the garage door, those are set back 38 feet from the property line, and the garage door itself is set back 46 feet. So I'm hoping that you'd agree that that's removing it from a active element and a dominant feature on the front of the building. Obviously, in two-dimensional drawings, you see a garage door that looks in this drawing as though it's up front, but it really isn't. This mass is a fairly strong mass. It turns into this mass, so this portion is what we're looking at being that portion that's less than 40 feet wide. And then this is back 47 feet from the street. Again, I have to remind myself that I have these larger. The first floor here is at 115.5, which puts the deck just at about 115. And we're at about 110 here. So that deck is up about 5 feet from the property. We'd be doing landscaping in the front, ideally a place that people could sit outside. And what I just wanted to point out is that that's actually, if we're talking about the character of this street, the idea that the porch is not on grade is very common at this end of the street. It's actually common as you get down closer to Chestnut. It's just the middle of the block where you've got very flat lots where the porches of the decks are basically a step 2 or 3 above the sidewalk. This just the idea that there are some of these buildings that are like houses that are multifamily, and then you've got these buildings, which are small apartments, but also the building next door, the idea of the driveway going back to an entrance. This obviously same level, we're sitting down in here, and we've actually put a retaining wall along the side that goes up. So it'll be hard to actually see our garage door. And there'll be landscaping alongside of that, which should help quite a bit. This drawing you've seen before. And one of the things I just want to point out is we often don't talk about the fact that most of these other properties have significant construction that goes back much further than what we're going back. It's not that we're trying to necessarily preserve as much of the backyard as we can, but when we start talking about coverage and we start comparing ourselves with these other buildings, which are significantly more coverage, this one's 78%, than what we're proposing, the real difference is not what happens at this end, at the west end of the building. It's really what happens at the back of the building. And we've made this so that we're 25 foot, which is the setback requirement to our back wall here, but this is the building wall that goes above grade. This is a retaining wall holding that back with the parking underneath it. This wall here is the back of our building, which I think doesn't make us, these two have more property behind them. I think it's just a matter of time before this property changes. So I think we've done something that works with this. And while we're at closer to 40% than 32.8%, the difference of if we cut this off, which compromises the ability for the units to work, I don't see what benefit doing something like that has for the community. As you notice, these backyards, there's a lot going on the other properties in the backyards. This is the view on the site looking out to the buildings that we're looking at the back of on Main Street. Pretty significant changes of level. So we're trying to make sense that this works in with things. There are closeness of this, but that's the nature of this street. This is the chart that you've seen before. And just one thing I noted, I just was going over this a couple of days ago, and it kind of resonated for me. People have acknowledged that they like the 138 Palisade Street building and don't feel that it's too massive, even though it's at 73% coverage. It's a 4,300 square foot lot with a building footprint of 3,196, which is pretty close to the 3,469 that we're proposing on a property that's twice the size. So, I think we need to be taking those kinds of things into consideration when you guys are thinking about this building. What we would like to do at this point is we would like to move forward with this being the formal application and start our public hearing. We understand that the planning board has the powers of modifying the requirements in the code if they so choose. I'm not saying that you want to, but I would think that with this, the right step here would be to take it to public hearing. And if the board decides that they would not be interested in considering waivers at this point, that then we would be sent to the zoning board for a variance for the site coverage. I do believe at some point that the village will move forward with making changes in the zoning district, but I think we might be a year away from that actually getting done. So we'd like to move forward now. The property owner has, this application has been pending since September. And it would be nice to get to a point that we can actually have public hearing, public comment, and see where it takes us.
No, thank you. You haven't been to the AHRB with this, have you?
We haven't been. Again, as similar to an earlier comment, I think the idea was to get to a footprint that we had some confidence in, and all the previous footprints we had, I realized, we're working on it. We're not there. This is one that I feel comfortable that can generate a really attractive building that would, be complementary on the street and make a good bridge between all the different characteristics that the buildings on the street have. So we'd certainly be willing to go to the Architectural Review Board on this.
Okay, thank you.
So let me say, first of all, I think this is like really much better. And I appreciate the fact that the porch level is now down to the kind of what we were shooting for. So I do think with some landscaping there and so on, that level, that first floor that you created would be in character with kind of what happens along the rest of the village. I like the split level because I think it kind of animates I think it makes for more interesting units and sort of animates things. I think that but this is something that you'll have to work out at the AHRB. I think there's something about the pitched roof piece that looks it looks a little bit, to me, a little overwrought. The sort of having this tower piece and then the flat building piece is not worked out. But leaving that aside for the moment, can you Ed, what were the, I'm just curious how this stacks up, because Ed and I actually met and we sort of divided those things that we think are going to be kind of guidelines versus those things where we're going to actually make changes in the tables. And so I guess what I want to ask Ed is how does this, the coverage that you have right now, Patty, is what percent?
It's 39.9, basically call it under 40%.
Just under 40%.
Yep.
And what is the height to the flat roof?
Where the structure, the top of the structure, which is what we measure to in Dobbs, is 147. And I guess we're measuring from 109.5. I think we agreed that was the measurement of that. So we'd be 37.5 feet.
Okay. So, Ed, how does that stack up against the coverage and height things that you and I were thinking of
So
bringing to the code?
with the coverage, he's under the required coverages before we reduce for the oversized lot. So the proposed coverage for a regular size lot was 40 by buildings and I believe 60 by impervious surface, but then after the multipliers, the building comes down to 32.8 and the impervious down to 49.2. So he's at that coverage for a regular sized lot, but with the sliding scale for the oversized lots, he's still over.
And then the height,
he's
what was
measuring from the average grade plane.
Well, the curve from if we were measuring from the middle of the front.
Code. Right?
I'm sorry, Ed?
I'm saying, I believe his height, he's measuring from the grade plane. And we're talking about on the street in the new version of the zone measuring from the sidewalk.
And what elevation does that, I'm curious how Patty's height stacks up to that number. What would that number be for our site? We were saying 35 feet. Was that the number?
We were.
I thought you said 37 at one of the meetings.
Maybe it's 30. Hold on, I don't remember myself.
37.
37. So it'd be,
yeah, it was like
37 plus. Then what's the actual elevation, Patty? 109 something.
109.5 is the elevation at the center of the property at the curb. So if I do my math correctly, which is there's no guarantee, I come out with 37.5 feet.
Would be the height of yours.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that was also supposed to, I think, be the number to the or that was to be the number to the middle of a pitched roof, right?
So top of flat or middle of pitched.
So your pitched roof thing would be would be exceeding that, right?
Right. I mean, I think there was also something that you worked on. I never saw the actual final document on it, but you had some provision for a property that was steeply sloped, or not steeply, that had a slope in it, which my understanding was adding 5 feet.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So
wait a minute, I just subtracted 153.82, the midpoint of the pitched roof.
Right.
From 109.92, and I got basically 44 feet.
Right. So maybe I misheard. What I had heard was it was 37. But then if you had a slope on the site, there was an adjustment that would be made for that.
I don't think so, Patty. I think that was going to be the height to the flat roof and the midpoint of a pitched roof. But you could make that roof, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is where it gets into AHRB territory, is the pitched roof business. So it seems to me that like the coverage is still kind of the the trip wire here, or the thing that,
Sure, I understand that you guys have worked on thinking that it should be less. I've got 2 apartments, about 1,200 square feet each on each floor. It's pretty much the minimum what can work and support building this building. We started with 8 units, we're down to 6 units. I think we've solved a lot of problems with we're now compliant with, well, I don't know if compliant. We have 6 spaces inside the building. The existing property had, required 3 parking spaces. So if I take 6 and 3, I've got 9 spaces, which is what 6 2-bedroom apartments requires. So I think we're very close on all of these things. I don't think this is a zone that wants to be looking at what the average of the neighborhood is. I think this is a zone that wants to understand that if half the properties are at something, it's not that we want the new buildings to be at that half. I think we want the new buildings to be closer to maybe an 80% of what the average on that street is.
we did. We actually did a calculation. I think this was Alan's idea. We actually did a calculation where we did throw out some of the big outliers, and then we looked for a number that would make 3/4. Wasn't that the number? I think you went, huh?
Yeah.
That would make 3/4 of the properties compliant. And that analysis is the one that led us to the number that we got to. So it wasn't like we were trying to just take an average. We were trying to look at the buildings we did exclude the buildings that we thought were kind of outliers because they were not, we were trying to find the thing that was most characteristic of the street. That's how we got to the number.
We were trying to make as many of the properties compliant to the code as possible as one of our goals.
Yeah, I'd love to see what that actually, I know you were doing those calculations, Rob. It would be good to be able to see those.
Okay.
Because what we came out with is in the 40s, not in the 30s.
Yeah, no, I've forgotten now. I have to, while we're talking, I can try to resurrect the.
Well, just if at some point you can share it with me, that's all. It would be good for me to understand exactly what math you guys did.
So is it really not possible, because let's say if we really feel like, excuse me, that this is like, for me, is kind of like addresses some of the big issues. Of course, I'd love to see the kind of 3-dimensional massing.
Sure.
That I know you're going to do. I feel like it would still be good. I'd like to see you hit the height, and I'd like to know, which it seems like you're close to. And I guess I'd like to understand why it is that we can't get closer to the coverage that we're looking for. I just don't.
We've got an elevator, which I think is something we want. That adds about maybe 120 square feet to a footprint. We're including our decks in that calculation. So, we're basically doing all of the footprint that is building, and that supports 2 1,200 square feet, 2 1,200 square foot units on each floor. I know you were working, I think you were working with 20% of, in other words, if I had, say, 2,500 square feet, I'd need 3,000 square feet to make it work, which would be probably closer to around 34%. You can look at the plans that we worked out. We don't have a lot of extra space. The bedrooms are not particularly large. They are larger than some of the smallest ones that we've seen. But again, we're trying to do a balance here. So if we're cutting to 6 units from 8, and we're trying to get this thing to fit into an envelope and be something that can actually be built because it supports itself economically, I think we're there.
Just one last comment, and then I want to hear what the other board members have to say. But I feel like that we did want a kind of 3-story building, and I feel like the tower, even though it is a tower with a very narrow frontage, is like essentially a 4-story building. And I guess I'm wondering if the pitched roof went away, because I don't necessarily think that the building can't be a flat roof building, then I guess one of the things that we were looking for was to get some kind of setback line at what would be between the second in your tower, between the 3rd and the 4th floors, that there would be some kind of like massing change there so that the tower didn't look like essentially like a 4-story.
Understood. The only thing that, because we played with that, I actually tried to work, what happens if the tower is something that starts at the, say, 3.5 story height, and you end up with dormers in the side or something like that. Yeah. It might be able to work. It also started feeling very manipulated, and there's a clarity to this that just seems very simple. The fact that this is 18.5 feet wide felt to me like it was nice having something that was just very clean. Dwight, I think, had some great comments during this process where he talked about, if you were able to make it look like it was not one building, but multiple buildings, 2 buildings separated or something like that. And I started feeling like this accomplishes that, because this is a very slender, simple piece of the building. And with the split, I think that was a great idea that you had. With the split, it really breaks it down, and you feel like it's a separate component in a way that all the other things we experimented with ended up feeling very manipulated. So I think it would be interesting to have a form like that had a clear roof. If you look at most of the other buildings on the street that have pitched roofs, they're actually pretty interesting. There's a very nice gabled roof on those buildings that gives its appearance to the street. And then there's a convoluted series of multiple different pitches that kind of wrap over a, somewhat awkward back of a building on most of them. So I think this gives us something that could be good, but that might be something that I know IERS talked a lot about this. Maybe the Architectural Review Board is where we get some inspiration to make that stronger or make it different.
Could you go to the overall street elevation, and then I'd like to hear from the other board members, because I've been, if anything, too vocal on this one. So I'm curious what the overall, the long, don't you even have a longer elevation?
Yeah.
Shows your facade in the context of the whole street. Okay.
You're talking this one, right?
Yeah.
I think I've got that in a bigger scale right here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, other board members, what's the feeling about it?
Well, I guess either the good news or the bad news is that this lot is bigger than, I guess, any of the other lots on the street. And so in trying to have rules that deal with smaller lots, it makes it very difficult to put a small, and probably uneconomic, to put a smaller building on a bigger lot. So I think that,
yeah, and one thing that, just to point out here, this is where I'm pointing. If you can see my pointer, that's the height of that, the front of the building, so to speak. If you carry that across, we're lined up pretty much with the eaves on the smaller of the houses adjacent. This house is actually, taller, as I think Steve Brosnan pointed out. I think, Steve, when you did your photo thing, you actually had to adjust it because it wasn't able to meld because of how much the street actually goes up at that point and how much higher these buildings are than the ones down the street. You get in this section in here and the street is flat, and the backyards are flat, and it's a different thing. Here, as you go in the back of this building, this is a 2-story building in the back. We're not only fully underground with the parking garage, we're below grade with the back of the building on the first floor.
I mean, I just look at the footprint here in the plan, in the kind of figure ground plan. And your building is still like an order of magnitude bigger.
Well, not than these, it's not. If you look at these 3 lots, the building, this building has the same footprint area basically as what we're proposing.
But that building is really kind of an outlier. And if you look to the building to the right and to the left of it, I mean, at the long L-shaped building, I understand, although it's interesting, right? If you look at how it presents on the street, it presents as one of the smaller buildings.
Right.
The buildings to the left and the right have significant coverage, but to the left, it's actually and the right, it's actually 2 separate structures.
Yeah.
So there is something that is still, for me, I feel like it's so much better, Patty, and I do appreciate the effort you're trying to make to satisfy what we're doing. It still seems big, but
8,600, almost 8,700 square foot lot compared to 4,300 square foot lots.
I know, but we do agree that like contextual zoning means that there is an adjustment for, all because a lot's twice as big doesn't mean a building should be twice as big. I mean, that's a kind of pretty basic principle throughout the building.
Here I have a building that's over 70% site coverage on a smaller lot, and here I have a building that has half the site coverage on a bigger lot. So it's going in that right direction. I'm just, let's say we said, okay, we'll do all 1 bedrooms, even though that won't ever get built because it won't pencil out. And we cut off the back of this building so that it was simply less square footage. What does the village actually care about that? Does that affect anything? If I'm in the buildings on Main Street and I'm looking this way, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. This house next door, I guess if it was here instead of there, they would see through.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like the backyard, as you've said in some previous presentations, like there is, we're obviously making we're making the way it presents to Palisade Street the most important thing. But you yourself have said that doesn't mean that the backyard should be. There is this kind of backyard mid-block space, which you said should be yourself. It should be kind of maintained as much as it can be.
I agree 100%. And that's why I'm thinking if we've got this 45-foot backyard, 25 or maybe 35, 25 plus, well, more than 10. And so we've got this with a sidewalk that comes up here, a door that comes out from the building on the 2nd floor level to grade. So people with kids, if they had a 2-bedroom, they had kids, they could come down the stairs, walk out the back into an area that could have play equipment and stuff for kids. And then there's still a private area off the back of this unit.
So I think for me, I hate to interrupt, but.
No, you should please. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Right?
I think for, just looking at this streetscape and looking at this new proposal, like to the left, I see like you're trying to, put in perspective the massing, but nope, go back.
Good, stop.
And but to the right, like if you actually look at the way that, okay, we've tried to make this more into a townhouse type thing or 3 buildings or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's like to the right, I see like to the left, it's like we have this little pitch roof, and then to the right we have this massive building again. So I kind of get what Rob's saying. It's like it's still too massive when you look at the building, and then to the right you look at this other home, and then you start to see the streetscape like scale down. I don't know. It's like maybe this should be 1 step down. I understand, and I appreciate like the work that's done into this, but I also see like it's too massive. I hate to say that, but you look to the right, to the left, you like almost like, okay, we've managed to balance the property to the left of me, but now all of a sudden to the right, we're like, okay, we're subdividing it into like maybe like row houses or townhouses or whatever, but then it's still too massive to the property to the right. And I don't know if it like fits, you know? Yeah, that's it, where you're pointing. It's like, it's still too massive to that. It doesn't have any relationship. In my opinion, I you know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I know what you're saying, Laura. I mean, it is true that, though, that I think, Patty, I know you're, you know, that piece is so far set back.
Yes.
That
But it doesn't have an architectural relationship. And maybe not, that's maybe not what I'm supposed to be looking at, but it just feels still too much like rigid.
Well, I mean, we, you know, obviously we're not spending time working out to that next level because everything changes with each footprint change on this. So it's just a matter of practicality and where you put your time. Until we have a footprint that's close to what you guys think works, we're not detailing any of this out. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that could happen.
Right.
With, you know,
I have Michael Lang asking to speak.
Yeah, Michael is the client here, so he definitely should be allowed to speak.
Michael, are you?
Well, Mike's getting on. Laura, I think this really, I think when you see the 3D of this, I think you're going to find that with this portion of the building, which is actually so far back, it's
No, I understand.
back of the other buildings.
I get it. No, I understand.
Yep.
Michael?
Hello? Yes.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. Thank you all for taking the time again to look at this proposal. I just had a couple quick comments. As someone had mentioned before, we've been in front of you guys now since last September. It was just over a year now. We've tried to make, Patty's tried to make, and I have tried to make every concession possible, try to, you know, listen to everything you've said, try to adjust it every single time we've come back. We've gone from 8 units to 6 units. At this point, this is the largest, or the smallest, I should say, that we can get this project. You know, is it possible if you guys waive the affordable housing unit, we'll do 5 units and make the building smaller? That could be a possibility, but at this point, to keep the affordable housing unit, to get the parking requirements, to meet your design guidelines, as well as try and fit in with this side of the street, I think this is our best effort. Last meeting, Rob Lane asked us to take one more shot at it. You know, we put in so much time into this one. I really think that I would really appreciate if we can move to a public hearing and get the public's input on this. You know, at this point, I don't know what else we could do.
Thank you.
I'd like to.
What about Alan? Yeah, Alan and Steve.
So I pulled up that spreadsheet we were just talking about, and you know, we're somewhere between sort of 37 and 39%. You know, with that 75 to 80% conforming on the street. So Patty, you said you're at just under 40% lot coverage. Is that correct? So, you know, it meets that, it nominally meets that criteria. Sure, you have to go and sure you have to go to the ZBA about it, but
Alan, we were applying a kind of sliding scale for the size of the lot that brought the coverage down to, what was the number, Ed?
So we have an existing section of the code, which is the sliding scale, which brings down the residential lot dimensions and coverage sliding scales, which is intended to bring down the maximum coverage and size of a house on an oversized lots. So this zone would have been, with the sliding scale that was existing, would have been at 22% building coverage and 44% coverage by impervious surface. So with the new 75% of 40 building and 60 impervious. Then with the new sliding scale, which is a multiplier, brings it down to 32.8 building and 49.2 impervious.
So it's not as close, Alan, as, but continue what you were
Thank
saying.
you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, and those are numbers. Those are, and you're actually.
Those are numbers.
Right, but excuse me, at the same time, I don't think it's fair to pick and choose when you use the sliding scale, because
we're not
we've done our
picking and
research
choosing.
as well, and we can come up with a handful of lots that the sliding scale was not applied to, or other projects where the sliding scale has not been applied to. So, and we were that was just brought to our attention, I believe, 2 meetings ago.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see how this is, I mean, there isn't, this is not, I mean, this is MDR2. MDR2 was not supposed to be the it wasn't that you were going from the OFs to the TF. We actually changed that intentionally. We were going from the OFs, we probably should have called MDR1 TF still, and then had this other zoning district. It's not a slightly tweaked version of a zoning district that supports 2,500 square feet as a unit. This is 800 square feet as a unit. And you're either undoing that and saying this is not about trying to intentionally intensify this street to be the place that those apartments get built. And if that's what the village wants to do, it should really just stand up and say, that's what we want. We do not want to have this be a place where you have more apartments that could be shopping in the town and using mass transit. I think, Rob, I've followed your career, and you have been an eloquent person who has helped communities understand that these are the places where you want to find the way to intensify. I think right now, the village is afraid of that thinking.
No, but Patty, but still, but within the context that it still has to look like it belongs here. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, we can talk about numbers and so on, and we're trying to do that because we're trying to codify as much of it as possible. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to step back and look at it and say, does this look like it's appropriate for the rest of the neighborhood?
Just to bring up one other point, Laura, you do realize on the right-hand side of the building, it goes back 46 feet from the street. I mean, I know it looks like one big mass on the streetscape, but it's really stepped back in all 3 sections.
No, I understand that.
So I was gonna go to talk a little bit more about numbers, but let me finish with that, saying that, Patty, we agree with you that the existing zoning doesn't reflect reality and should be adjusted, but we're working towards that. Okay.
Yep.
Even with that new number that works well in your favor, you're not conforming. The existing code, you're less conforming, right? So that said, the ZBA is probably going to have to get involved, as I understand it. But that said, the sort of 2D image I'm looking at here right now that you're sharing doesn't reflect that setback. And so it's hard for me, looking at this, to understand how that big setback on the right side is going to subjectively appear when I'm standing on the street. So is there a way that you can draw this in a more 3-dimensional way that will help us understand what the visual implication of that setback is going to be?
With the fact that the architectural planning profession just lost 20% of its employees in the last 3 months, we have had a lot of people offering to do piecemeal work for us. I don't know if that's right. Freelance work, I guess, not piecemeal. Freelance work for us. So I think it would be very easy for me to reach out to someone and say, would like you to, develop a 3D model of this that we really can see not only of this building, but at least the 2 buildings on either side. And something where you could really see it, maybe even the boxes of the buildings that are up on Main Street. Because I
When you're
think,
walking down the street both directions and you're just standing across from it, what's it really going to look like?
yeah, well, across from us is the parking lot.
Well, people are still walking down the street.
Right, but it's in terms of what, it, to me, it's subtle, but that makes a difference, because if I'm down, say, where these buildings are, and I've got buildings across the street, I've got a double loaded street that feels like, houses are facing one another. This building is facing the river. The next building, from this building going down, the next building is 145 Palisade Street. And, that obviously is an anomaly and very well protected because it's down so far. But all of the plans that I've seen for that property of building additional buildings on that property have buildings that are significantly larger than this. So
that's fine, Patty. And I buy the argument that this is where we want to increase density, but I'm with Rob in that if it doesn't fit in visually with the neighborhood, I can't get on board.
yeah, and the comment that maybe there's something different that happens here on this, maybe this roof is something that's.
Let me jump in here. I'm also with Alan and Rob that it's got to fit into the neighborhood. And I'm going to say it, I think you need to get somebody who can design, who's an architect, who can actually look at Rob's drawing of, the levels, the fenestration, the rhythm of the other buildings on the street. And you're going to have a lot more success with this if it's a good looking building. Right now, it's sort of put together. I know it's just a rough sketch, and it's supposed to be for massing. But if it's a beautiful building, you're going to have a much easier time getting this past all the boards. And I look at 66, 68 Main, which really doesn't relate to the buildings on either side. All the floors are at different levels. The fenestration's totally different. And I just don't want this building to look like that.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see what that would have looked like if they had built what the design was.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you saw Rob's sketches of how the rhythm of the street works.
Yep.
You gotta get somebody who can, gets that sensibility.
I mean, the people we work with do really, really good buildings. I mean, they're, David Kim is, we're working on a number of buildings all around the country that are quite nice. It's a matter, the challenge in some of the communities that are upscale, like I would say Dobbs Ferry, is it's very challenging to get an architect engaged in the beginning, given that, it can be a year of trying to find our feet. We made that mistake at 75 Main, and we went with a very well-known architect who does very major, nice buildings, and he gave up after 6 months.
Well, you heard me say several times that I thought that the architecture for 75 Main was quite good that ARPAD had done.
Yeah.
It was a really good design. And I think it had a lot more, at least in the planning board, it passed the planning board and then got shot down by the.
Yeah, but let's deal with, okay, so I'm sitting there trying to sell people's interest in being involved in doing a project in Dobbs Ferry, right? And they asked me questions, and I explained how with 75 Main Street, and I showed them the drawings that we had with ARPAD, and we had a unanimous recommendation of the planning board, the architectural review board, and I think Dwight and George, you were all in on that as well. Unanimous recommendation goes to the board of trustees, and it got tossed.
Right. We don't have any control over that.
Well, that's a different problem, and I know some of you.
See my original point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate all the work you've done on it, and this has been a long process. And it's basically you're trying to reinterpret the code, and we're saying, well, it's not quite there yet. So,
But it's gotten better.
Well, I know your point, Steve, although at some point when we're allowed to sit in the same room with one another, or ideally get in the same car with one another and drive around, because giving you the addresses, I don't think does the same as you and I, because I want to hear what you think about it, not just show you something. I think there's a real conversation to have there, because it's a deeper conversation than it gets turned into on the street.
Well, let's not do it now.
Right, for sure.
So are we ready to call for a public hearing? Do we want to see more, or can we do it at the same time?
For me,
What's our
it's
next step?
not there yet. I think it still needs more work.
You don't, I mean, do not discount the fact that this is not a process in Dobbs Ferry where we go to a public hearing so that you can do the final approval of it. We've made that mistake in the past, and we don't want to do that here. We don't know. There might be hundreds of people who are totally against this and would say this should be an 80-story silver building or something. Who knows what they say? That's the point. Who knows?
I think we do know what they're going to say.
Well, we actually, the comments that we get, and that's one of the unfortunate things in this culture at the moment. The comments that we get unsolicited from people offended by the attitude that some people have is the only thing that keeps our group going. You know, when you get the gifts from people saying, I just put this together because I feel terrible about how you've been treated. It's the thing that makes it feel viable. The people who are opposing that stuff are not the people. It's not the majority of Dobbs Ferry. I think I've told the story before when I was giving a talk to 1,500 people, and I was talking about the challenges of approvals and how it all works. And I talked about how 10% of the people are doggedly against it and 10% of the people are for it. And at the end, when I was done, somebody, and the other 80% just want to make sure they can get to the train on time. So somebody in the audience said, so how many people do you think really hate you in Dobbs Ferry? And I try to be dramatic. So I think it's like 150 people are like, you know, have a dartboard that they use regularly with my picture on it. And he said, and how many people live in Dobbs Ferry? I said, 11,000. He said, so you're talking not 10%. You're talking 1.5%. And unfortunately, the 1.5% who are doggedly, aggressively against things are not balanced by my 10% who are in favor. It's another 1.5%. It's probably 97% of the people just want to take the train.
Let's go on to the next thing.
Sure.
What happens next, Mr. Chairman?
We would like to be a public hearing, and there's no limit on public hearings in the village of Dobbs Ferry and how long they take, but at least we would get public input and we could, you know, that's where we can bring people in.
No, I said Mr. Chairman.
Are we doing a public hearing on this project, or are we asking for
Is it an
another?
actual application?
Are we asking?
It would be this application.
Yeah, let me ask a question. You had public hearings earlier the night for buildings that are far less worked out than this.
Right, and the comments on those other projects as well. One was, would it be feasible? Or the other one was, we've moved setbacks to allow you to do other things. Like, everything on our project has been completely negative, and we haven't even been able to move forward. So I'm just wondering why we can't. What would be the harm in moving to a public hearing?
I don't think anything.
Well,
Thank you. I mean, we've been here for a year.
I think the issue here is that we're trying to come up with a solid plan for this area because we're rezoning it, and unfortunately, this project is in that zone. So,
But we've tried, respectively, we've tried to comply with everything that you've asked for, design guidelines. We went from 7 variances down to 1, I believe. I mean, we've made drastic improvements from where we first started.
I understand your frustration, and I sympathize with you. And
so, Laura, it would be a mistake to make it seem like we got broadsided by something here, because that's not really accurate. I mean, I think I've been very vocal since 2010 that we needed to get these things worked out in the zoning district, as well as a long list that I have typed too many times of other things that need to be corrected in the code.
And there was a memo from Han Engineering, I believe in 2016, which was 4 years ago, that I didn't even become aware of until I found it online on the village website.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same exact issues that's been going on for 4 years.
I apologize because I haven't been on board that long.
No apologies necessary. It's understanding that to get this to get resolved, I think this project is forcing the village to deal with an issue they need to deal with. And I'm hoping that the village is the one that I think it is and wants to have the kinds of things that will make us more diverse, more sustainable, more resilient.
Patty, you know what, I think, you know, Patty, you know, Rob and Steve and, you know, Ayer have been working really hard to, and I think your project has pushed them to try and resolve this. So, you know what, they are trying really hard to push it.
Great. I've been appreciative
And
of
they are being very considerate of your project because they are trying really hard to set a something that we all can work with in the future. And so, you know, I wouldn't take it personally, and it's unfortunate sometimes when you try and build in an area where they are trying to rezone it, and everyone's pushing really hard to figure out what's the best of everyone's interest. And you know what, your project is not the easiest to solve. I mean, it is a big, you know, it's a big piece of property. It's a development that is going to, not that you want to hear this, set a precedent, but it will. And we're trying really hard to, you know, move it forward. And we understand your frustration. We understand your client's frustration. And I really think, honestly, we're not trying to block you from anything. We're just really trying to make sure that whatever we do is in the best interest of everybody.
Of course.
And I know you don't want to hear that because you just want to build.
Laura, you know, to the contrary, that's exact. You and I agree on this, and
But
that's what
you know what? That's where our hearts are. Our hearts and you know, we dedicate our time to make sure that everything we do is in the best interest of everybody. It's not just you. It's not just the, you know, whoever wants to build in the future. It is. I'm sorry. It is in the best interest of you. It is in the best interest of everybody that wants to build in the future. And you know, that's where our passion is. It's not to like hurt anybody. We're not trying to stop anybody, but you know, I don't want to see any.
Not, and I've never accused you of that. And Rob,
And I think it's also that we're just afraid that we're going to keep on going down this road with the board, and we're going to make all the changes with you guys, and then it goes to open a public hearing, and then all of a sudden all these other comments come in, and we have to change it to a totally different direction.
Like really trying hard to like not make that happen. We don't want you to be like jump through hoops every time we have a meeting. We're trying to consolidate our thoughts and what's in the best interest for everybody. And you know what, maybe, you know, you've done a great job. We're not saying you didn't. You've tried really hard and we appreciate that. But unfortunately, it's just not there yet. And I don't know how. I'm not involved in the whole zoning process because there's professionals that do that, and Rob obviously has a lot more experience than I do. So, you know, we're all trying to just make it all happen, and we feel for you. I mean, I feel for you, but we all have to.
But as Rob can attest, I'm not new to this, and I've been putting myself in the front of those efforts since I got started in '69. So
right. I haven't been involved in that. All I can say is when I see something, and you know, I've been doing this for 30 years, and you know, I look at a building and I say, you know what, it's either you got it or you don't. And I look at this landscape, I look at this streetscape right now, and I'm like, yeah, it's good, but it can it be better? Yeah, it could be better. Right. You know, it doesn't quite fit in yet. And, you know, and I get it. I get what Rob's saying. I get what everyone else says. And I understand it. And I sympathize for, you know, the client. But we need to make sure that whatever we build is the right thing for our community. And that's our job.
Patty, I think it could be helpful to do a couple things, even though we're not 100% here. One would be to send it to the AHRB, because But maybe they could kind of enlighten us about this one or a change. And let's have a public hearing, and so we know what, usually we probably are in a little bit more unified position before we go to that, but it could be useful to us. And, this does.
Thank you.
We don't
Steve,
need to
could
be
I make a suggestion?
making particular ground now.
Big.
Steve? How about if we move this to the front of the agenda and invite the AHRB for a joint meeting for this project? Instead of
like that.
them looking at it, then going back to you, sit down together. So, everybody knows what everybody's talking about.
I like that because it relates to the massing. I mean, we are supposed to be deciding about the massing, and I think the AHRB could take part in that too.
I think that's a great idea. The only thing I would offer is that for them to be, I know Ayer has been keeping track of this, but I don't know whether the others are really aware of it at all. It seems that to have that meeting be what it really needs to be is that I would show this to the ARB, perhaps as a presentation, no comment or discussion really, before that meeting, so that when we're going in to have a meeting that the two boards are sitting together jointly, it's not the first time that the Architecture Review Board's seen it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it seems okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I go for that. I think that would be fair.
And then
Do that at the next meeting?
Okay, so get on the AHRB as soon as possible, and we'll have a joint meeting and move this to the front of the agenda for November.
So Ed, that would be at our planning board meeting that the architectural review
Yes.
board would join us.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
Do we have to make a motion?
No,
Aye.
I don't even know what the motion would be. It would
I
be,
don't think you need a motion.
You don't need a motion.
no, we don't need a motion.
No.
Thanks, Dan.
Great.
Could be to close the meeting and go home.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's
We
different.
still have 9 and 10.
Things on your agenda still.
Wait a minute, I'm at home already.
Oh, there's more to come.
Yeah.
Oh, the recreation fee.
Yeah, that's it. I think we already spoke about the MDR 2.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Let's close this item and go right to the rec fee and get the bid.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
good.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You
Thank you.
too.
All right, well, this is a referral from the Board of Trustees to review possible step pricing for the rec fee as opposed to our current flat $10,000. I don't know, Donna, is there anything background you want to give us?
Yeah, our project had come to us where they were adding another apartment in the building in the downtown. And I think it was like a 1-bedroom apartment, and they were assessed the $10,000 rec fee. And they said that since the building, it's kind of complicated because the building was 8 at one time, then it went to 6, and then Ed has the numbers better than I do. But anyway, it was a building that had more apartments at one time. They went to less apartments, and now they wanted to bring back another apartment. And we were going to assess them the $10,000 because it was a new apartment. But in the conversation, when he was asking to be relieved of that, we began to realize that why should a 1-bedroom apartment in an apartment house pay the same amount as a 5-bedroom house, single-family home house? So if the idea of the rec fee was to help alleviate the demands made on recreation, then that didn't seem to be fair. So we thought that it might be a good idea to look at this to see if we could come up with something that, would be fairer, and maybe even get us some more small apartments if they didn't have to pay the huge rec fee. So that was kind of the basis of it, was to, you know, I mean, if it stays at 10 per unit, fine, but we thought it was a good time to
Wasn't
look
it
at this.
like a retail space or something, and then
No,
then
Oh,
they were converting it into a residential? Is that what it-
Yes, it was retail.
No.
They were taking half of the retail and converting it
Right.
to residential, so they
Right.
owed a fee, but that's, you know, besides the point here. It was just during that conversation, it was brought up by a couple of the trustees that maybe we could have a sliding scale based on the size of the unit. So every new dwelling unit pays a rec fee. So it was set at a base flat 10,000. So I don't know if you all saw the proposal that I sent to you.
Yeah.
via Email, and that was just as a suggestion or a possible starting point. I said that if we said that the average, the 10,000, was considered a 2-bedroom, so that would be in the middle, and then we would say go down and up 2,000 per bedroom each way. So starting at a studio, the rec fee would be 6,000, a 1-bedroom 8,000, the 2-bedroom 10,000, 3-bedroom 12, 4-bedroom 14, plus 2 per bedroom above, 2,000 per bedroom above that.
Sounds perfect.
Sounds perfect. I'll second that.
No, that does sound reasonable.
Yeah, I think it's great. Great idea.
All right, we can send that to the Board of Trustees for ratification.
Look at Rob is smiling.
Would you like to vote? Make a motion and vote?
I'm smiling because I'm realizing the strategic value of offering any kind of answer at 11 o'clock. The likelihood that anybody would start picking a fight. I mean, I'm going to remember this.
I think we're all screwed away.
Next time I want something, I'm going to bring it up at 11 o'clock.
Be the last one on the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think it, no, but I mean, I don't know if the numbers make sense. I do think if we do want to encourage, if we're not just trying to penalize the possibility of people building small apartments and getting more housing in places like downtown, then I think it absolutely should be
Yeah.
a gradient. I have no idea how to judge. The scale that Ed presented sounds good, and that's why we're all nodding. Sounds intuitive. I have no idea what it really means in terms of the likelihood of somebody wanting to do a small apartment in downtown or not. But
Like 90 studio apartments in a building. I feel bad for the family that brought this up, though, because it's just, I mean, they're having their mother-in-law move in or something like that. It's like, right, it's all in the family. And they're paying a rent, and they've been here for years.
I mean, part of me feels like for really small apartments, like studios and 1-bedrooms, maybe it should be even lower.
Mhm.
You know?
Well, but it's people, not beds. So.
Yeah.
Right, but the idea, the real idea was whether or not somebody really, I mean, isn't the real origin of it this idea that theoretically you have a kid or kids, and they're using the recreational
Well,
facility.
recreation is not just for kids.
But also they have.
That's true. That's very true, Ed. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, the City Center that, they just built, and if you have a senior that.
Yeah,
it's true.
Need to utilize that asset or the senior bus or whatever.
Right.
I agree.
Old people like me and Rob, we could be in that studio and save a couple thousand.
Well, this seems like a move towards fairness, and whether the numbers are really right or not, it seems fairer than what we have.
Yeah,
I agree.
So I'm prepared to support it.
Okay.
Me too.
All right.
Somebody's gonna make a motion.
Yeah, Ed, give me your numbers again.
So the rec fee for new dwelling units would be scaled at 6,000 for a studio, 8,000 for a 1-bedroom, 10,000 for a 2-bedroom, 12,000 for a 3-bedroom, 14,000 for a 4-bedroom, and 2,000 more per bedroom above that.
Okay.
And what was it originally?
10,000 flat.
Regardless of the size.
All right.
regardless of the size, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Pretty
Yeah,
fair.
well, we should
I
have to
would,
talk about implementation by the Board of Trustees, though. But as long as the planning board's, finds it favorable, at least the board can, proceed on trying to establish this sliding scale.
They asked us for our opinion.
Yeah.
Yep, we did.
do we need a, Dan, do we need a motion to do this?
Yeah, Ed's requesting that. I think it would be a good idea.
Okay, well, I move what Ed said.
Second,
Yeah.
Favor.
all in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
All right, so I'll just send him this document.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ed.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
All right, I'm playing golf tomorrow. Anybody care?
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Gotta get a good night's sleep.
Yeah,
So
good.
motion to
Right.
close the meeting?
Yeah, I move we close the meeting. Is there a second? I'm
Second,
sure there's about 20 seconds. All
All
right.
in favor?
Aye.
All
all in favor, see you next
Good
time.
night, everyone.
Good night,
Okay,
all.
good night.
Be
Good
safe.
night. Take care.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you, Alyssa.